So I will call the February 14th meeting of the Westford School Committee to order. Happy Valentine's Day, everybody. And very romantic evening you all have ahead of you. Looking forward to it.
You can tell we have teachers in the audience. Right? Yes.
With the red, I know. I like that. I don't even think about wearing red.
Clearly.
I don't own red. I don't think, yes. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And as I'm standing, I see I have a blue light in my face. Carrie, do I just need to switch input? Last time you were like, you guided me through the... And I'm going to change one thing.
So we have to do it there?
Speaker.
And then it searches for it, right?
Do you know it's Feb 14th? You weren't reminded of Valentine's Day. You weren't reminded enough. Wait, let me see. Where are my notes?
The suspense.
Right.
It works out well because I had forgotten to officially start the Zoom webinar. So welcome those of you joining on Zoom, folks at home on YouTube. If you think you want to make public comment when we get to that in a few minutes, then if you're not in person, then you'll want to be on Zoom to be able to do that. If you're in person, it's much easier. You just walk up to the microphone. And while we're waiting for that, let's go ahead and move on to our consent agenda.
Motion to approve consent agenda as outlined on the February 14th meeting agenda.
Second.
So we have Valerie with the motion, Catherine with the second. Any questions or discussion? All right, all in favor? That passes unanimously. Thank you. And let's go ahead and we will start with public comment. Again, if you're on Zoom, you would raise your hand and we would bring you in for public comment. And if you're in person here in the room, you can come to the microphone. And just a reminder that we're going to limit individual comments to 2 minutes to give everybody as much of a chance as possible to speak who wants to. And what was the other thing I was going to remember? Oh, please state your name and your address when you come to the microphone.
Maybe they can write it down as well too.
Oh, that's right. And we have a sheet so we can write it down so that we get it right in the minutes. Carrie, thank you so much
Thank you.
for doing that.
Sure.
And we have somebody on Zoom. Patrick, I don't know if you can hear us, but you have the floor.
Hi, thank you very much. My name is Patrick Mahady. I reside at 18 Abbott Street in Westford. Been here for almost 10 years now. We know that COVID testing will be discussed during this meeting today. My wife and I would like masking to be discussed as well. We understand that the district can make their own decision regarding masking. I'm a father of a medically fragile 3-year-old who attends the Miller School. He is high risk. He is labeled as disabled, and he's too young to be vaccinated. He also cannot wear a mask. I am speaking on behalf of my child as well as some other families who feel this way. We feel like masking should continue in some schools, at least until after the April vacation, when the cases might go down a little bit further. We feel that this is necessary in order to protect the high-risk population, the disabled population, and the under 5 who can't get vaccinated yet. This won't have to be all schools and everyone, but we hope that you take this into account when you make the decision for masking and accommodations. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for the comments and for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. I have another Zoom commenter. Hi, Elizabeth. You may go ahead when you're ready.
Good evening. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you. I have a comment. I know this evening you are discussing a statement regarding the events at the basketball game from 2 weeks ago. Thank you for doing that, and I look forward to hearing that statement this evening. My request is for you to consider hosting a community forum around this issue, because I think the community is hurting, and I think that part of the solution is for us to have a dialogue. I know you are engaging a number of consultants and folks to help you as the school committee, the administration, and in our buildings. I think this is an opportunity for parents and the community to be part of this conversation. So I would encourage you to find a way to do that, and maybe with an appropriate consultant, we could have a good community discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And we will, yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about some of those plans on that agenda item, which is coming up shortly. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't know. You're being so subtle about it.
Trying to bring in the Zoom.
Thank you.
I just wrote my name down, but it doesn't matter because you can't see it.
You already came up here and wrote your name down?
Yeah.
You were trying to bring people in.
Yeah.
We just-
You're very-
we all saw
You're
that.
very sneaky, or I'm easily distracted.
You're
so-
concentrating really hard.
Yeah, okay, great.
So my name's Anita Tonkung-Wen. I'm at 9 Plain Road. And I do wear a couple of different hats in town. I'm on the Select Board and Commission on Disability, but I'm really here as a parent. I have a 3rd grader and a soon-to-be kindergartner next year. So I'm actually going to be commenting on, and it looks like you have a lot of stuff tonight, the WA incident and like the whole situation. I totally agree with Elizabeth that the community is hurting, and I do actually feel a little underwhelmed with the communication that's been coming out. I feel like it's felt a little bit reactive instead of proactive. And I think part of that is because the level of trust isn't there with the community, where something like this hasn't happened before. You have new leadership. And so you want the community to trust what you're doing, but if that communication isn't there in front, then it's hard to trust the process. It's hard to trust what you're doing. And although I understand the need for a community forum for communication, I think a huge lesson learned from me from the school community forum that you had a couple of years ago was that I didn't really see from the public side what that follow-through was. And I would hate for there to be another community forum without follow-through that's very transparent and that members of the community can understand. So I was just coincidentally on the WA newsletters. That's how I understand what the updates are. If I didn't have those, I would have no idea what's going on. But as a parent of a student of color, as family member of color in town, that's hugely impactful to me to understand what's going on. So I'd really encourage you to be more proactive with the communication, being more thorough, and tying in the process to what the results are, or like tying in what are the steps. Why should we trust this process? What is it other than conflict resolution? Because to me, conflict resolution is not a strong enough term. It doesn't hit the emotional impact that this incident has on the community or members of the community, such as myself. So I just wanted to share that with you as a parent and as someone who recognizes that you all are leaders in the community and people are really looking to you to lead this. So I just wanted to share that. Thank you for your time.
Thanks. So you can do the name after
I'll do
too.
that after. Thank you.
Okay, hi. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Melissa Mackey. I'm 12 Fletcher Road. Thank you for taking my comments into consideration this evening. I'm a parent of 3 children in Westford Public Schools, a 4th grader and 2 first graders. I want to share my full support of the DESE decision to allow the mask mandate to expire on February 28th, and I ask that the superintendent please follow and stay in line with this guidance. Masking was never meant to be a long-term solution for schools because it has significant harms. All children's learning depends on being able to clearly communicate and read social cues between peers and teachers. Masking impedes this access to learning. Additionally, masking disproportionately impacts students who are learning English as a second language, who have learning disabilities, hearing impairments, speech and language delays, and other special needs. Young children are especially vulnerable as they are at a crucial stage in social and emotional development and are beginning early literacy skills and language acquisition. The World Health Organization advises against masking young children because of the potential impact of wearing a mask on learning and psychosocial development. Masking was always meant to be a bridge to vaccines. Vaccines are highly effective at preventing severe disease from COVID. Because of the harms that 2 years of masking has had and continues to have on our children, and because of the much stronger mitigation that we currently have in place, like vaccinations, a mask mandate is no longer necessary. Some kids are really struggling in their mask, and we can help them most by moving from a singular focus of prevention of COVID to one that acknowledges our children's overall health, development, and well-being. Please follow DESE guidance and allow the mandate to expire on February 28th for Westford Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Anybody else here in the room for public comment? Sure, come on up.
Hi, John Canistaro, 11 Lakeshore Drive South. Members of the school committee, Superintendent Chu, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak here tonight. I come here tonight to talk about the mask mandate in Westford Public Schools. At this point in the pandemic, I feel very strongly that it should be up to each person's personal preference whether or not to wear one. I have 3 children in the Nabnasset Elementary School. 2 of them are autistic. My children's developmental pediatrician and therapists have all told me that learning how to talk, communicate effectively, and read other people's emotions will be a challenge for them, and that learning these skills at a young age is crucial for their education and development. Wearing a mask is a huge hindrance for my children, since it makes it harder for them to hear others and to be heard. Wearing a mask makes it impossible to see if the person they are talking to is smiling, frowning, pleased, or in distress. For us adults, this is a temporary issue, and we can endure a couple of years without adverse effects. But my children have only one go at elementary school, and for them, each day is a critical learning time that they won't have a second chance at. I have spoken with numerous parents in town who feel the same way I do. Elementary school children and those with learning disabilities are receiving an inequitable education. The DESE mask mandate expires at the end of this month. I ask you to consider the wishes of myself and other parents I've spoken to. Please lift the mask mandate on February 28th. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Anyone else at home on Zoom? If you have any other comments, raise your hand. Anyone else in the room, feel free to come up to the microphone. Seeing none, we will move on to our informational updates, and we'll start with the superintendent update.
Sure. I have one update tonight. We do have a lot of things on the agenda that we're going to be talking about. But aside from that, this Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, our Office of Pupil Services with Director Moran has been partnering with Westford CPAC to present Dr. Ross Green, who is the founding director of Lives in Balance. He's the author of he's the originator of the Collaborative and Proactive Solutions model, author of books The Explosive Child, Lost at School, Lost and Found, and Raising Human Beings. And there is going to be an opportunity for him to be presenting. And so if you are interested in that, it's a Zoom activity, and you can register by going, it's posted on the special education page of our website. Is that correct? Yeah. So if you haven't registered yet and you'd like to register, you can access the link.
You don't have to register.
You don't need to register. Even better, but that's what the link is.
Chris, it's also in the newsletters from the principals for this past week,
Yep.
and then it's also on the CPAC's Facebook website. So
Fantastic.
Great.
it's out there.
Good.
Nice.
That's, that
Looking
was
forward
gonna
to
be- I just
Yeah.
wanted to make sure that was
Good.
said again tonight.
All right. Any school committee updates? Alicia?
So policy subcommittee continues to move along at a good clip, clearing the decks of the policies that came down from MASC that might have needed attention. We're working with our students about the student advisory committee. We also met last week with the Clean Energy and Sustainability Committee again, and we brought in Dr. Chu for that one. We're working on some policies there. We're just, we're gonna keep going in that vein, but what I actually wanted to update on was our uploaded minutes. I accidentally left the tag draft on all of them. Those are not draft, they're official. I will give you clean copies of those tomorrow morning, Nina. I didn't notice that until today that it still said draft, so that's it.
Great. Thanks. Other school committee updates? Valerie?
Just to share that last week at their meeting, the select board approved our 3 remaining phase 1 ARPA requests for a panorama subscription for next year, Lexia subscription, and the 5th hour for elementary math interventionists. That sort of was the remaining requests on their phase 1 process, but phase 2 will continue. So as always, any specific ideas or requests can be shared through my email, vyoung@westfordk12.us.
And so people know those typically would get taken up at the finance subcommittee. That's why it's going to Valerie.
Yes, sorry.
She chairs the finance subcommittee, so
Yep.
we kind of vet them through there and then bring them to the committee.
Yep.
Great. Thank you, Select Board, for continuing to work through all those ARPA requests. Okay. All right, student updates.
Sure. Well, first off, in the spirit of Valentine's Day, we had to go do Secret Admirers Day today, which was really successful. I think we raised about $800.
We had like 400 sales, so
Yeah.
I don't know how much that translates to.
Can you just tell us what that
So-
entails?
So students purchase Valentine's Day grams, which are candy and teddy bears.
And roses.
Roses.
Yeah.
And the Stuco delivers them around town, or not town, school in the morning. You can buy them for your friends, and then all of the money goes to student events and stuff that Stuco does for the students.
Can you buy them for yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, there's plenty of people that bought them
I
for
did.
themselves.
I did. And then we also had the Whitmiss or Whittentine's
Whittentine.
performance,
Yes.
which is Westford Academy Improv. And it was my first time going, and they did an excellent job. So I want to say good work to all of the performers. We also have a few updates on how we've been integrating DEI into what the student council is doing. So we discussed the incident at our meeting last week.
Yeah.
Compiled some comments from the student council into a document and shared it with the administration, just so that they could have a better sense of what the student body was feeling. And then we also discussed how we can integrate more education in DEI into our meetings. So we're going to be doing more with that every week.
Yeah. They all wrote like letters anonymously, and then just the e-board, we went through them, and there were like a lot of common themes that we found through them. One was unfortunate was that a lot of kids said that they weren't necessarily surprised, which indicates a big issue if that is not coming as a shock to people. And I think it also goes to show that as we continue to progress, there is still racism ingrained in our school system, and there is still work to do, no matter how much progress we make. So we shared that with Mr. Antonelli. He was really happy to hear from students. And we are elected to be the representatives of the student body, so it was it was good and it was informative to see what the students had to say about all of that. A lot of them said that, you know, we need to work on our DEI work, especially being the representatives of the school. So we took that into account, and now we have to sort of look at what are the steps forward in making this a more normal topic. Some person said, like, it shouldn't just be complete silence whenever we bring up DEI. And I think that's a big issue. So, you know, that is the work that we're going to look forward to really making a change at going forward. And then, you know, there was some discussion on prom being moved. I know there was on the Facebook groups, there was a good amount of discussion as well. I know students felt a little bit upset because if I'm correct, I believe there's a senior, I believe there's like a gymnastics event that day, a really important qualifying one, and it's on the same day as prom. And this year they have a real shot at, you know, going to wherever that is. So that was something that came up. And then the last thing, the last thing is the mask mandate. There is, you know, a lot of opinions circulating, a lot of confusion going around school as to how that's going to affect us, what's going to happen with that. And on a better note, though, the QR codes have been posted all around the school. They've been in the bathrooms. I think that we should really try and market it well, because I think that some students are a little bit confused in the sense that I did hear some feedback that they thought that it was like something you could just report anonymously, and so they were confused as to why it was asking all this information. So maybe that needs to be made more clear. But you know, they've been posted around the school, they're in all the bathrooms, so that's really exciting.
I had one more thing, actually. I think in the public comment, we were talking about a community forum on the incident, but we are also having a student forum at WA Wednesday after school with the admin.
Yes.
So students can ask questions and learn about how the school is going to work towards making the community more respectful and
even to
better
just share your
focused on-
thoughts on
yeah.
to just come and give any of your thoughts that you have on it.
Hannah, Magna, is that open to the whole student body?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And when was that, Wednesday?
Wednesday right after school. I think 2:10, 2:15.
Okay, cool.
With
Yeah. And then I may be wrong, but I also think we're having some kind of lesson on DEI in our classes on Friday afternoon, our conversation. I think Mr. Antonelli might be able to speak to that more than I, but that too.
So that is what we have for you guys.
Thank you both. That was a great update. Appreciate hearing about all of that. Okay. We're going to move on to business, and we'll just kind of continue the conversation a little bit. We're going to start with talking about the incident that happened a few weeks ago at the basketball game and some of the response and some of the things that have happened since. And we have a resolution, a draft resolution for this committee to discuss and potentially vote on. I was thinking we could start with that and just start with that conversation and see where we're at with that. And then we'd want to, you know, if we do choose to vote on that, then we want to make sure we're reading that out loud. That will be, it's in the packet already, but if there's any revisions, that'll be put in the packet as well. And I guess I would also, I don't know if I want to do this now or later. I think just a brief word about the approach. You know, there's been a lot of talk about using a restorative approach to address this, and it's been in a lot of your communication. It's in our draft statement, and there's certainly more to be said, and there'll be more, I think, discussion and public education about this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about it, what that means exactly, because I think it's important that people know, and I agree. I think something I've learned through all of this is people are really hungry for information. They want to know what's going on. They want to understand what's being done, and I think you've been great. Dr. Shu's been great about frequent updates. Principal Antonelli's been great about frequent updates, but it's just that constant reminder that people want to know, because in the absence of information, you might have concerns. So to speak to the restorative process, and I'll try to keep it brief, but it really is a way of addressing when harm has occurred in a community. And community can be whatever your definition is. It could be as small as a small group. It could be, I consider Wayland, their community as part of our community, right? We share a sports league. Our communities are probably similar in a lot of ways. Geographically, we're close. So there was harm done to their community, to our community by this event. And a restorative justice approach or restorative approach, the aim is to look at what harms were caused. So what harm was done and who was most affected. And then to say, how are we going to address that and who is responsible for addressing that? And so it's a little bit different than, say, a rule-based system where you're saying, no matter what, when you do this, this is what happens. It's a little more inclusive of those who are most impacted. And so part of this restorative process should and will be talking to those most impacted, and that includes the player from Wayland, more than anyone was most impacted, and understanding what her needs are. How has this impacted her? Looking at the Wayland community, their basketball team, their high school, and the broader community, we will aim to find out and to engage with them on what the impact has been for them. And as people have talked about here, our community is impacted. The girls on our basketball team, the other students at Westford Academy, and the whole populace of Westford feels an impact of this. And so what you're feeling and what they're feeling matters. And so there will be engagement to hear from folks and to hear how it's impacted. And then once you have that, you look to the people responsible and you find, and you ask those impacted, how should we address this? How should the individual responsible address this? How should the community address this? And so it's a very open process that pulls in those feelings and those opinions from those most impacted, and you can start to see what sorts of things might happen to repair the harm, because that's what it's about. It's restorative. It's a restorative approach. The whole idea is that when there's a harm, you've hurt relationships and they're broken, and that you want to repair them, but you have to do that by looking at what are the needs of the people who were impacted. And so you aim to repair those harms. And at the same time, the people who are most responsible get to take accountability for what they've done. They get to learn the impact they've had. They get to hear it, hopefully firsthand, or at least in some sort of synopsized form of what the impact their actions had on so many people that normally maybe in a typical disciplinary approach, they wouldn't hear that. They would get disciplined and that would be it. No, they're going to hear what impact they've had on the community, and they're going to have to work to make things right. And it should be hard work, because the harm was great. The work to repair it should be great as well. And then hopefully at the end, there's a lot of opportunity for community involvement, but hopefully at the end there'll be more communication about how the harm was repaired. And then I think the other piece that we've talked about is just, that's a response to one incident. We know that we have to look at systemically what are the things we're doing that we could do better so that we prevent future incidents. And I think that's the ongoing conversation that Dr. Chu and our administrators have been having, and we will all be continuing to have. So I hope that gives a little bit of a sense, I think, of what we talk about when we talk about a restorative process. And you'll talk more to this in a bit, but some of that has been underway, and it absolutely will continue as we go. Any comments or questions from the committee, or do we want to look at the resolution? Lori?
I appreciate you giving some broader context to what a restorative approach is, because I don't think a lot of people are familiar with it. I think it's a thoughtful process. I think it's a deliberate process. Unfortunately, that may also mean it's a slow process, and I can understand the frustration that may cause in the community. I think, as people have said, the community is hurting, and I think the community is looking for a way to address that hurt, but it may not be a quick process to address that. We want to address it in the right way, and we want to address it in a way that is respectful, first and foremost, of those who were most harmed, but is in a way that is educationally appropriate for the students who were involved. And that necessarily means it may be a slower process than the community would like. But I think we need to assure the community that absolutely that this committee and this school system is taking this incident extraordinarily seriously. I think this statement is a beginning, but not an end. So this statement, I think, starts a process, but does not end it.
Thanks. That's a good addition to the discussion. Thank you. Other thoughts? Yes, Catherine.
I completely agree with what Gloria has been saying in terms of the restorative practices and the time that it's going to take to truly do a thorough response, I think, to this incident. I've spent the last week kind of thinking about my role on school committee and our role on school committee of what could we have done better, because like we have said, we are leaders in this district, we are elected by our community, and I have had many of those community members reach out to me over the last week, and it would be remiss of me if I didn't have a think about what could I have done better, and what could we have done better. And I think what it really boils down to for me is that I would like to think that as a school committee, we could be better with communication. And I also think we should be stronger at collaboration. I don't take this lightly with what I'm saying, and I've had to think a lot, very deep about it, but I'm disappointed that we as a school committee did not work to come together sooner than tonight. I believe that this incident required a response separate to just being another item on our agenda at a regular scheduled business meeting. I think had we done that a week ago, we would maybe have put the 7 of us on a more stronger, collaborative, stronger communication pathway. Because I will admit this week I have felt that as a member, I didn't always feel fully informed as to who was doing what and what was happening. I didn't think we had a clear plan. And I'm cross with myself that I did not speak up before tonight. It was hard to try and figure out what was going on because there were so many conversations happening. So, I would ask that moving forward, we as a committee sit down and look at what can we do to improve collaboration amongst the 7 of us for future, and hopefully not these incidences, but for any, topics that require a lot of soul searching. And I know, some of the conversations about it have been, well, we have to take our time, we don't want to have knee-jerk reactions, and I completely agree. But sometimes just having a discussion and dialogue isn't a knee-jerk reaction. It's maybe giving the space for collaboration, better communication, and more mindful communication to occur, in the whole thing. And I'll be honest, at the very start of this, we were sat here 2 weeks ago when the email was sent out from Jim Antonelli, and I'll have to be honest, I was disappointed that that's how we as a group found out about this to begin with. And I think we can do better and we should be doing better. And so therefore going forward, I am committing to trying to make sure that we as a committee continue to build stronger communication, because I think we do better as a group. We have so many talented people here who have passion, and want nothing but the best for our district. And I would really like to see us foster that in a positive way as a group.
Thank you. And I think, just listen to what you said, I think there would have been an opportunity for us to meet, you know, off schedule, which is, I think, is what I'm hearing. And just, I think most people, obviously everybody at this table knows, because of open meeting law, we can't collaborate over email and things like that, right? Every meeting has to be posted 48 hours in advance, you know, public meeting, that sort of thing. So it does add a burden to our ability to do that. But yeah, we could have, you know, we've done it before. We could have had an off-week meeting if that felt like, you know, if that felt like that would have been helpful. So it's something to keep in mind, that we do have that power to do that. And I think it's a good reminder that we should think about our ability and our role in these kinds of things. I think as the public conversation. I mean, I will say, I think from an administrative standpoint, I have felt comfortable that it was being handled. I know that the committee doesn't see this. You know, we're having more conversations than necessarily the whole committee is. And so, as far as handling the incident, you know, it was where it should be with the administration. But we have that public role, and I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
You know, like, could we have used it in a different way? And I think I think we probably could have.
Yeah.
Thanks for bringing that up. Other things?
So do you want me to explain how we came to a draft?
That would be great.
Okay. So, like Chris said, because we cannot meet as a full body without a posted meeting, and we were rapidly approaching this meeting, the policy subcommittee is often tapped to draft resolutions that then can come to the full committee. So the policy subcommittee, which is Gloria, Nora, myself, and Claire, we put together just some draft language for everyone to look at tonight. We did run it by the administration for privacy concerns, because we do need to be conscious of the fact that we are talking about minor children, and FERPA applies, and there are privacy concerns here. We also wanted to make sure it was factual and make sure that we had called out the process as it had been to that point in an appropriate way with the information that we had. So in front of you all now, you have the draft resolution, so if anyone has any comments or edits or additions they would like to make, by all means.
Or motions. And thanks to the policy subcommittee, you guys had a mega meeting on Thursday. I know this was just a piece of that meeting, so.
It was all fun.
We enjoy work.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks for putting this together on short notice. Sean?
Yeah, thanks to the policy committee. I mean, this is great. I do have one slight edit I would suggest. In the second line, it says, "We, the Westford School Committee, wish to extend our sincerest apologies to the athlete, their team, comma," and then I would suggest their families, their family, comma, and the greater Wayland community for the hurt inflicted on them by members of the Westford community.
You got that, Alicia? You're
Yes,
in
I
it?
do.
You're in it?
Does that feel okay for
those in
folks?
the audience
Yeah.
watching, this is live editing of the document, because again, we as a group don't get to do this unless we're in a public meeting,
Yep.
so. Yes, I
And
did add
and the
that.
draft was added to the packet, so
Okay.
for folks at home, you can see the draft right now if you'd like to, so you'll know what we're talking about. But we will also read it
Yes, and
shortly.
any changes that get made will be turned into a PDF, and I'll send that to Nina for the packet as well, so it can be updated. But yes, that was a great suggestion, thank you, I have added that.
Seeing as we're in the second paragraph, are you finished, Sean?
That was the
Sorry.
first
Yeah,
paragraph.
I'm good,
first
thank
one.
you.
The first part. Oh, sorry.
First
I
paragraph,
was kind of
yeah.
wondering. Could we look at changing the first sentence in the second paragraph to Westford School Committee supports the ongoing investigation of the incident and the initial consequences that have been administered? I think read stronger.
Okay. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? I like that it's an identity first
Yeah.
statement, so try that fast. Everyone on the committee can see me typing right now and making mistakes. Say it again for me.
Westford School Committee supports the ongoing, where are you? The ongoing.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm cleaning up Alicia's typos as she says.
It's, the cursors, there's a few things going on here. It's confusing. The ongoing investigation
Yep.
of the incident
Okay.
and the initial consequences
That, let's say
That.
that happened.
that have been administered, yeah.
We accept all grammar things except for the Oxford comma. I will not be letting go of that one.
And I'm just looking for consensus. I'm looking for kind of general consensus.
Yes.
You know, committee, like it.
People who laughed at that, thank you very much.
If you hear these edits and you have concerns, raise them, right? Otherwise, we're going to assume by consensus that people are comfortable with these.
We have a bunch
additions.
of teachers here, don't be talking about bad grammar.
Is there anything else anyone wanted to add?
Okay.
Motion to approve the Westford School Committee resolution regarding incident on January 28th, 2022.
Second.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's Valerie with the motion, Gloria with the second. Any further discussion or questions?
Real quick, Chris,
Yep.
just so we don't move on beyond this, have we discussed like who we plan on actually sending this to, besides just making it a public
We haven't.
sentiment?
Let's discuss that.
Okay. Yeah.
And there should be a reading of the resolution before we vote on it.
So
Yeah.
maybe we should do the reading
Okay.
first, because
Yeah.
All right, let's
Yeah.
do that. All right, shall I read it?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. On Friday, January 28th, 2022, a visiting athlete from Wayland was subjected to racist, disparaging, and insensitive comments from spectators during a basketball game at Westford Academy. We, the Westford School Committee, wish to extend our sincerest apologies to the athlete, their team, their family, and the greater Wayland community for the hurt inflicted on them by members of the Westford community. We share the deep sadness and outrage that has been expressed by both our communities. We respect Wayland taking steps to put the well-being of their students first and are committed to collaborating with Wayland to repair the relationship between our communities. Westford School Committee supports the ongoing investigation of the incident and the initial consequences that have been administered to those involved. Furthermore, Dr. Chu, Principal Antonelli, and this committee have all reached out to our counterparts in Wayland to express our sadness, anger, and regret over the incident, and to offer to partner with them in the healing work we hope will come out of it. It is the hope of the school committee that a restorative approach will be used to address this incident. A restorative response places the focus on the harm done to the student-athlete from Wayland, as well as the harm done to the Wayland and Westford communities. The individuals responsible for this incident must continue to take steps to take full accountability for their actions, to learn and grow from the incident, and to meaningfully repair the harm they inflicted. We look forward to regular updates from the administration regarding actions being taken. We know that no words can undo the harm that was done, and no one action can create a safe and welcoming spaces for every person. Our diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts are ongoing, and we will move forward with a renewed sense of urgency. There are difficult conversations to have. These are difficult conversations to have, and anti-racist work is not easy. We, the Westford School Committee, reaffirm our commitment to the continuing work of anti-racism as we reflect on and review our policies and practices. We acknowledge our responsibility to ensure that every member of our community and all guests we share our spaces with will be safe, respected, and feel the sense of belonging that every individual deserves.
Did we take the vote?
We did not take the vote.
You're still in discussing the vote.
Sorry, yep.
Yep.
It did get a second, though.
Just wanna make sure.
So I guess I'll call for the vote. Oh, Hannah, yes?
I have a question.
Sure.
To clarify, this resolution is the beginning of the conversation, right?
Yeah.
So my second question, I guess, would be, can we send an additional update of the specific things that we're doing once we kind of determine how we're going to approach that?
Yes. So I think of it as this is this body's first public statement on the incident, right? We will, in this forum, as a committee, continue to give updates as we do, but as Dr. Chu and Principal Antonelli have done, there will be updates given that way as well, and we'll continue to look for more and better ways to communicate with not just students, not just families, but Westford in general, because it's true, if you're not subscribed to certain emails, you may not be hearing these things. So So yes to all of that. This is the beginning, and we will have an eye on keeping students, families, and the public updated on what's going on.
And also Wayland too.
And Wayland as well. Yep, absolutely. And I think, Sean asked where this will go. Obviously we're going to post it. Maybe we post it online on our website. Maybe it goes out in an email. We can send it. We can look at ways to get it to the Wayland community as well. We've made outreach, like I said, to the school committee and administration there, so we can also get it out that way as well. And if anyone else has any ideas.
I'd like to make sure we share it with our town DEI partners.
Yes.
Because I know that they're also working with us on this as well. So let's
Thank
make sure
you.
we share it with them as well.
Right.
And select board.
So I think, Chris, the easy ones, right, are the parents, but equally tied to that are our colleagues at the town who may not have school-age children, right?
Yeah.
So, however, whether or not that's the
Maybe
town manager's newsletter or something like that.
Thank you.
Because that gets the select board.
Yes.
Certainly Wayland. I don't think this is really directed to the victim of the acts, but certainly to the Wayland community. At
I
a
think
minimum.
we'll still share it with everybody, and we'll share it with her as well too, because I think it's an
Yeah.
important thing for her to know that you're publicly making this statement.
Thanks. Yeah.
Okay.
Should we consider sending it to WestfordCAT and the Lowell Sun? I'm just trying to think of the community.
I think that's a reasonable. I think they're going to pick it up anyway,
Yeah.
with my guess. But yeah, I think we can reach out and
I think
push
there's
it
no
out rather
harm
than.
in making the action.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, let's do that.
Just-
I don't know whether you all, this is in your power, but I think it would also be helpful to send it to the students, like through their emails. Like a lot of the emails get circulated to the parents, but like when you think of, we are the ones that have done this, we are the ones that are affected as well, pretty like greatly. We are the ones that are now branded with this unfortunate incident. So I think it would be important to also send it out mass an email to the entire student body.
We can turn it into a PDF and post it in Google Classrooms.
Oh.
It can be posted in all the Google Classrooms.
Will that have
I
the same
just
impact
want to say I think it would be a little bit more helpful to send it in an email. I think most students, and I say that there is a difference because I think most students actively check their email as opposed to like if something's just posted in Google Classroom, I maybe would not.
Okay.
Yeah, I
I'm not
agree.
saying in public that students don't check everything that's posted in their Google Classroom.
I feel like it's a newsflash that students check email.
If
because
it
that's-
is,
I mean, like, I don't want to make fun of you. I'm sorry.
no, it's okay.
I just think, I just have to investigate
Yeah.
the challenge. of
Yeah,
it. The
I
reason why I say
understand.
posting in a Google Classroom is because it's just then a PDF that's posted.
Right.
The email comes with whether or not there is one source that can easily email the students in the same way that doesn't then end up with a lot of, like, you don't want 60, like, for example, if Mr. Antonelli sent out an email to all the students, he could then end up with 16 out-of-office replies,
Yeah.
1,600 out-of-office replies in his.
I
like,
understand.
so we just want to look at what's the most efficient way to do it. I think
Yeah.
if you're saying that getting it to their email box
Yeah.
is best, then we got to figure out how to.
And I think the deans do that a lot. They'll say, a lot. They'll send, like, when we have homerooms or stuff like that,
They'll
they
send
send
it
out,
us as an email.
it's pretty normal, which is why I said that. But yes, I do check Google Classroom.
Okay.
But only if it's an assignment.
Yeah, I'm still living in the world of talking to middle school students where we were like, no, they have email, but they don't have email. They don't really want them to have access to email.
Well, that's my question too. Like, obviously, Westford Academy students, this is of interest to them. How about middle school students?
I think.
Can we push it out
Yeah,
that
definitely.
way as well?
Sure.
Yeah, Hannah?
I'm sure the ghostwriter is on top of this, but
sure they are, too.
definitely send a copy to them too.
Yeah. They've already posted it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I'm sure, but
They're
just
working
in
on the
case.
infographics for.
Amazing. All right. Did we vote? We didn't vote.
You have a
All right,
motion and a second.
I have a motion and a second. If there's no further discussion, I'll call for the vote on voting to adopt the Westford School Committee resolution regarding the incident on January 28th, 2022. All in favor? Okay, that's unanimous. Thanks for that discussion. Thanks for the helpful edits and thank you for the suggestions and recommendations, which are really valuable, and for the vote.
And, oh, sorry. We tied.
Deferring?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, tie goes to Glory.
The ghostwriter was brought up. For those in the community who are looking for a very thoughtful, well-written, excellent piece by a student discussing a student reaction to this incident, please visit the ghostwriter. There is an excellent editorial there that I found extremely impactful and I think should be supported and widely disseminated. So for those who are hungering for information and perspective, there are some very wise thoughts from a very young person there. So kudos to that author.
Great. Yeah, it was excellent. Valerie.
I just wanted to circle back to, Alicia had said about sharing this with the town DEI committee, and it reminded me that when we talk about the layers of, and sorry, just to back up too, that I've been in some of the discussions about the restorative practices in the last week, and as someone who has no prior experience or prior knowledge about that work, it's been an interesting kind of lens to feel that tension between wanting sort of quicker information and that patience of that, you know, that deeper work that we hope will happen. And I say hope, not to speak to our commitment to it, but that there's a lot of things that have to kind of fall into place to do that. But one thing that I wanted to repeat that was said in one of those conversations was that a harmful act has ripple effects. And when we think about the layers of our kind of approach to this, there's like the students that are responsible and impacted. And then, as comments have been said about the community and the need to heal with that. And I think, sorry, that's what's triggered this roundabout way of saying that I think that we should be engaging with our joint DEI, with our town DEI committee as we think about a community forum and those community conversations to engage with them.
Yep.
That's all.
That's great. And as you know, 3 of us attended the town DEI, is it School and Education Subcommittee? Is that the name?
Yep.
Ming Chen sits on it. You sit on the subcommittee as well, right? Yeah, that's right. And Catherine, I think, attends regularly as sort of a quasi-liaison, and I sat in as well, and it was a really good conversation, and it really touched on a lot of these themes, because there was this frustration and desire for more information, and we were trying to explain the process that was in process, and I thought it was a really good give and take. And I walked away, and so this will be the last thing I really have to say. I walked away with a sense that if there's one thing we could look to going forward, so not about this process, was this addressing this feeling that we as a community are surprised or some of us are surprised when something like this happens because we don't know of all the times things like this are happening. That sentiment that like, oh no, these things do happen in Westford, but unfortunately people don't hear about them because, you know, sometimes legitimate privacy concerns or whatever, you know, the processes that are in place. So I walked away thinking if there's one thing we could do, it would be that we have some sort of a reporting and tracking of incidents like this in finding a way that we can publish, you know, with privacy considerations taken into account, publish at least counts or nature of events so that people have a better idea. And obviously that's a longer conversation. I'm sure there's policy committee would want to think about that. I know administration needs to balance it with everything and think about how you would implement something like that. But that's, if I came away from that conversation with anything, it was that if there's a way that we can let people know that when these things do happen, just so we as a community know. And then there's also the response and trying to figure out how we respond. But that's, you know.
So I can just
yeah,
jump
please.
in there.
Yeah.
So at the very least, we now have our civil rights reporting form.
Right.
Okay, so anytime that somebody accesses the forms that Hannah was talking about, if we access the forms, whether or not it is determined to be a violation of somebody's civil rights, we would be able to collect the data as to how many different incidences have been reported, right?
Right.
So I think that'll be helpful, right?
Yep.
As people kind of understand that and understand what that process is. And so that on one layer, I think, is something that would help us do that. I think it does get challenging when you're talking about a school system with, 4,600 students who are navigating hundreds of decisions every single day, each one of those students, right? And there are times when, a first grader might, get in trouble with another first grader, in which case I don't necessarily know if it's always appropriate then for the principal to send out a message to the community based on an incident between two first graders, depending on the incident, right?
Sure.
And so I'm just saying, so I
Yeah,
feel
sure.
like that's just where it starts to get
Sure.
complicated when we're talking about sharing information and incidents that happen. But one of the things I just want to say to I think, Hannah, you had asked the question also about whether this is the beginning. I do want to say that I'm glad that the school committee has drafted this resolution and that you've made this statement and you voted on this, because it's a beginning of their communication with this. But I kind of want to remind everybody that Mr. Antonelli has been in communication with the Wayland principal since immediately, right? And they've been talking regularly. I've been talking with Superintendent Easy. We had other conversations today as well. You've reached out to the chair and vice chair of the school committee. And in part of this, where it feels like things are taking a long time, it's actually when you're in the middle of it, it is all encompassing. It is happening so fast in terms of trying to stay on top of and share information. It can be challenging. So I do apologize if people feel like we were not communicating enough. I do think I need to continue to investigate what are my true options beyond Blackboard Connect, because I think to Anita's point earlier, like, I'm aware of how I can communicate with all of our families, and so we did start doing that. So we started communicating with our families 2.5 weeks ago on the, three days. I sent something out the Tuesday after the event to all of our families. But outside of the town manager's newsletter and or the Westford Neighbors magazine that I've started posting updates in, I don't necessarily know of an emergency way of communicating things with the entire community. And I can understand how upsetting it would be for a member of the community who doesn't have children in the school system to see our town talked about on the news. And that also becomes a whole new, whole new dynamic. So that's something that I'll continue to explore, to figure out what that is. And I would say if you are aware of other ways in which we can share information, you could share that with me. I think that'd be very helpful.
Yep.
I do think it would be helpful on the communication if we look at talking to somebody, a communications consultant. I mean, I think that's something that's been coming loud and clear. So it might be a good time for all of us to maybe have a look at what we can do to improve that.
And just as a vehicle for communication.
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
social media, there's pitfalls and pros and cons, but I think there's probably a way to craft a social media communication
your MySpace
plan. Yeah, you put it on your MySpace page. But I do think that's something if people could subscribe,
Right.
Between Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, you cover a good chunk of the Westford population.
Well, and one of the issue, again, for me, I know that if I push it out through Blackboard Connect, I will hit all of the contacts that our students have in our student system.
Right.
If we use our email lists, that is up to people who have elected to sign on to
Right.
those email lists. So that's not,
Right.
when you have something of this importance, you want to make sure that it goes to everybody. And then, so you can share it, that's true, and that might be a way to do it, to share that information as well with social media. I'll continue to explore that so I can make sure that people are informed.
Magna, yeah, you've had
I'm sorry. I know we need to move on, but I just wanted to say that I'm glad that this is just the start, because I feel like real progress requires people to get real And when you get real, things become uncomfortable. And I think until we start to like actively seek that discomfort and have those conversations, we're not gonna address the root of these issues. And so that's all I wanted to say about that.
Thank you.
And I want you to come back to future meetings and just say that again. Right? Like I think we need to keep hearing that. I think that's kind of profound and important to remember, because you're right.
Thank you.
I think that just the one last thing that I just kind of want to share with everybody as an update is that we are looking at establishing community events, both, first of all, a smaller community opportunities for even the athletes, the members of the two teams to potentially talk, students to be able to talk within Westford Academy, and then connecting with Wayland, and then members of our community at large, right? And so opening that conversation up. So to the point that I think Elizabeth had asked that question, and Anita had asked that question as well too. Like, that's part of our plan, and we're looking at that over the next couple of weeks. We're trying to figure out, I think scheduling something like that during a vacation week is not necessarily a good idea even for a community event, but it might be possible for some of the students impacted to be involved. But we would be looking like when we come back from vacation, where we would be starting to have some more of these conversations. And one of the things that we're also looking at, Superintendent Easy and I, when we were talking today, we're talking about trying to figure out if there are ways for our spring captains, coaches, and athletes to have discussions before the spring season, and see if there might actually be a way to either utilize that time that they would have been playing each other for interventions and discussion, or if they feel like they've had conversations, if they want to engage in that in competition still. So that's something that we're talking about as well.
Go ahead.
To that end, I would suggest that this be a regular agenda item for the remainder of this school year at the very least, so that we can get those regular updates, so that at least that portion of the communication feels a little bit more regular for the public, because they know where we are every 2 weeks on a Monday night.
Sure.
And, we can update them as we go.
That's great. And you just mentioned conversation with Dr. Easy, the superintendent of Wayland. Just a good reminder that you are in contact. You had another conversation with him. We did hear back from the Wayland School Committee chair, just thanking us for our outreach and saying that they were going to have a conversation with their administration. I know Principal Antonelli is talking to the Wayland High School.
Right.
So that's been good. It's taken probably a little longer than we thought it would for, to like have those, I know you didn't hear back for a while, and, just the nature of these things. Everybody's trying to, to manage everything, and I know that those conversations are going to grow and be part of the foundation of this response. Gloria.
I just wanted to thank you for everything you just said and echo it. I think we do need to find a way to have these uncomfortable conversations. That gets compounded because any conversation this body has to be done in public, and then we also have these competing privacy concerns. But from the perspective of a committee member, I know we've had administrators sit at this table and give us very detailed reports about the e-cigarette problem at our schools, and what are the consequences for a first, second, and third offense, and what steps the student might go through, and what program they might be using. So if I can have that level of detail about what, in general, not a particular student, of course, we're not violating anyone's privacy, but if I have that level of detail and information as a committee member about how e-cigarettes are addressed in our school, I don't feel like I have that level of insight information as to how a racial incident is handled in our school. So I think we need to find a way to have that conversation while respecting the privacy concerns, even though it is uncomfortable. But that disconnect is disconcerting to me as a committee member.
Actually, Gloria, that came out of, I don't know if you remember, Chris and Ming Chen, the meeting on Thursday night. That was absolutely something that we kind of spoke of, as some of the members kind of felt that if we had a specific anti-racism policy, which I think I've flagged for Alicia that we should probably stick on our agenda,
that it would, or, you know, that it would, you know, direct kind of future handbooks, that it would be really good for students to also know in advance of making those choices what potential consequences are out there for them. So it was a sentiment that the DEI Education Town Subcommittee, it's a long one, felt as well on that. So I think that makes sense.
And I gave this perspective at that. I mean, the flip side to that specific spelling out ahead of time is it doesn't allow for a restorative approach as well. If you have sort of, if you do this, you do this, you get this, if you do this. So I would say it's harder to spell out consequences for things like this.
Yeah.
It's also, when you're writing something, and if you decide to draft something, you also have to consider that the language that our students are using is constantly evolving, not in ways that e-cigarettes are, right? So I mean, like, you can't, I don't mean to be so curt, but it's like, that's a very different thing than somebody who is actually using language that the adults who are hearing it might not even know what it means. And so it takes a little bit more investigation, it takes a little bit more understanding, so I wouldn't want it to be, it would need to be drafted in a way that it was more about the victim.
Yeah.
And the
Exactly.
impact.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a totally imperfect analogy, but just a recognition that the way we discuss this is so different than the way we discuss other things.
It's probably more about when it does happen, being able to discuss what steps were taken. You know, how did the individuals take responsibility and without giving away private information.
Exactly. I think that would help the community's understanding and comfort level a lot as well.
Yeah, I have a feeling we'll be talking about this in the coming months. So, I was going to say, did you have more updates? Because I was sort of getting ready to hand it off for updates, or do you feel like?
I mean, I do feel like, other than the timeline, right, that we're talking about, the information that I shared with everybody on Sunday, I do know that I have learned that in my eagerness to share the video on Sunday, I shared the draft video, and WestfordCAT does a great job of sharing drafts with us ahead of time and gets our approval. And I was like, yeah, this looks great, I'm gonna send it, woo! And so then they posted the actual one, and so that draft that exists in the email now goes to a video that's not available. But the video is posted in my update that's on the website, and I think I will just send it out again. But so, and that is my fault, and I apologize to Nick for doing that, because I just sent out, he just said no. So if anybody is trying to click on the link from the email that I sent out to watch the conversation with members of our DEI response team, that draft email is no longer available, but the actual one is now posted. It's on the WestfordCAT. It's in the update section of on my page of the website, and we can share that again. That's all it did.
Great. That was good. I'm glad you guys filmed that. It was great. I thought it was really helpful, really informative. And I appreciated the update on Sunday too, because I thought that really gave a lot of information. So hopefully, if people haven't seen those, do find those and check those out.
Well, the challenging thing is, I think, to kind of Glory's piece, is that we have been doing a lot of very significant work, right? The school committee has been passionate about this work, about our work being anti-racist here in our district. We've been doing this work as a leadership team. We've been working with our teachers. It does take, it takes time to build that capacity, and even to kind of build the courage across a very large organization for people to be willing to engage in conversations. And so it does take time. And so when something like this happens, it reminds you of how much work that still needs to be done. And when people aren't aware of that internal work that's being done, they might feel like, oh, they don't understand, right? Or they don't think that anything is being done. And I will say, in my conversation with Superintendent Easy, it was very important for him to understand. He wanted me to explain what I thought the restorative practice meant, right? Because it was very important for him to know, if he was going to engage with this, and if his community was going to consider this, he wanted to make sure that our focus was truly victim-centered, and it was truly about making amends, and that there was accountability, right? Like that is a part of it, and that has already taken place, and that then it's actually an extended process. Because if they were thinking that, oh, we either didn't know what we were talking about, or we weren't really invested in it, then I can totally understand why they would not want to participate. And so that was another piece of just trying to make sure, okay, that we're on the same page when we talk about what these things mean.
Great. That's great to hear.
Chris,
Catherine.
could I just say, is there any, should we consider, I know I had put in for the ARPA funding initially about looking at hiring a DEI director. I'm just wondering, is there any, should we be revisiting that conversation? Because I know it didn't get into the phase one. And the idea behind it was that at the very least, if we could fund a DEI director for the schools for 18 months to 2 years, that I know it's potentially an ongoing position, but that we would maybe at the very least have somebody who is qualified in the area, bring practices and put procedures or processes into place in an area that I think would be really helpful for everybody. So I'm just wondering, could we revisit that and maybe seek to almost kind of put it into select board for a kind of a separate hearing? I don't know what people are thinking.
Can I suggest that you don't do it for a long-term position in that way? Because the conversations that I know that they've been having, they're also struggling with using temporary funds to fill a permanent position. We invested a great deal in Dr. Khalees Warnham this year, who has been providing professional development and consulting to us throughout this whole year. And I feel like continuing something like that is also like that is a contract for a specific amount of time. So to use one-time funds for a designated contract is very different, but I would be very reluctant to request funds to support a position.
Well, I think select board have done, they've funded a wellness coordinator for the town with the same idea in mind, that it's being funded for one-off funds and that they will review it after the initial contract expires. And
Can you submit that?
Yeah.
We'll submit it officially, that way it gets on the finance subcommittee's radar, and we can talk about what the different options might be. Sounds like there's a range of things that you could think of that might be considered to be used, ARPA funds to be used for.
Yep.
And later on, we are going to talk about our thoughts about shifting the focus of one of our positions. And I think we can talk a little bit more specifically about when we get to that part.
Okay. Any other thoughts on this agenda item, or should we? Okay. I think we can move on to the transportation contract. And we will be joined by our Director of School Finance, Pat Lenhart.
Just here in case there's any questions.
Okay. Your name is on the agenda.
You're
Alone.
presenting.
So I think we had already discussed this, right? The parameters of the proposal. It's a little higher than budget, but only by about $13,420. It was a negotiated agreement. The base bid had the base 3 years plus 2 additional 1 years. This is nowhere near what had been in the packet for 2022, 2023. And then even after the initial response from D-Transportation, they went back and sharpened their pencils again. They came back again. It is the recommendation of administration that this proposal for transportation be approved for FY23.
And just to be clear, when you say it was nowhere near, it was lower, just so people know. It was substantially
yes.
lower than
So
what was in the original contract.
D would have legally had every right to stick with the FY23 proposal that was in the initial bid, which was $133,000 more, $133,800 more than what we are paying.
Yep.
So.
Gloria.
Thank you for the work to control and manage these costs while maintaining a three-tier system. I hope in the future, one day we can consider a 2-tier system, but I know that's not in the cards just yet. One of the questions I had was, I know that this is being funded by, in part, by ridership fees, and is based on, I know ridership has changed due to the pandemic. Based on what we're seeing in ridership this year, do we feel like the projection for next year, that those fees will be available to help fund?
So they're budgeted. I had actually just sent Valerie a note, you probably didn't see it, an email tonight saying that we have a finance subcommittee meeting on March 1st, and I requested that bus fees be on the agenda.
The other point I wanted to make is I noticed there is an increase in athletic transportation costs, which also unfortunately might involve a
Yes.
fee discussion. I know that, and this is awkward to bring up in light of the conversation we just had, but some of the schools we compete against in the league that we compete in, our students travel long distances to compete. That translates to time for our students and costs for transportation. I don't know if administration or the athletic department has looked at the possibility of competing in a different league that would be closer to Westford and therefore involve less cost and potentially give us more flexibility when we do reach the time, which knock on wood I hope will come, that we can actually have a discussion about later school start times. Not having our students have to travel such extraordinarily long distances for some of their games could have an impact at it. I think we may be coming to a time that we have to look at that.
Alicia?
So Pat, on the second page, it says, please note that the above agreement is predicated on the following. Can you please explain what the district waiver of performance bond requirement means?
Yes, so that's sort of a little non-traditional, but I'm honoring past practice because, so basically you would have, the vendor would go out and buy a bond and there would be a cost for them to buy the bond. And if the vendor were to stop operating, you would go to the bonding company and say, you need to give us money now to continue our operations because the vendor is no longer operating, okay? But in light of the fact that this was a very challenging budget to fit this into, and the historic relationship that the district has not required it, and the fact that they were clear if we required it. Now, I did ask them to quantify the cost. Well, how much would it cost? And they did not respond to me. But they were clear that every penny of a performance bond would be added to their proposal. So it was the district paying for it. I would not have waived it if it was not the district's past practice.
And so we think that's gone back some time.
Yes.
That we've waived that.
Yes.
And just a follow-up to that is, for the public, when we're talking about our bus contract, we have a 3-year contract, and then we usually have 2 years that you can opt into one at a time. So this is the first of the 2 opt-in years?
That's exactly right.
Okay, thank you.
Right. So the most we can do is 1 more year.
And Pat, just to clarify, for the motion, you would like the per run amount read out loud?
I would, because there's a little flexibility in the number of buses, and so it's best to just list it on a per route basis.
For just regular transportation, or do you want me to read the?
So I think we should do basically what's all 6, right? The 3 and then the 3. So the
Okay.
3. Okay.
Okay.
Just to have it
I'll
entered.
try.
You're gonna make a crack at that?
I'm gonna.
Just to have it entered into the
I've been
minutes for
training
record
all year
keeping.
for this.
Yeah.
Was there any other discussion, or should I prepare to
You can
botch
motion
this?
anytime you want.
Okay. Motion to approve the transportation contract with D Bus Services for FY23 with an amount of $414 per regular transportation run, $85 per kindergarten midday run, $135 per run for after-school activities, $4 per mile for athletic run, $55 per hour for wait time for athletic run, and $250 trip minimum for athletic run.
We're all just kind of in awe of your motion.
Making sure she was done.
Yeah, that was really well done.
Great.
Got it all.
And just for the public's clarification, the kindergarten midday run has to be included in the transportation proposal, but the contractor is aware that it could go away.
They are. It was discussed.
All right, we have a motion by Valerie, a second by Alicia. Any discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. Motion to approve the transportation contract for FY23 as laid out by Valerie in her motion. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work on that.
Nicely done, Val.
Wait, Chris, briefly?
Yes.
If we do, Pat, if we still have you, for that, for the kindergarten midday run, that means if we go to full day kindergarten, is there gonna be cost savings of 121,000?
There will be. The only thing I have to make sure is if it's gonna bump any route above ridership for the AM or the PM, right? So there's a little flexibility there. If you have a route busting at the seams, and now nobody's going home in the
Okay.
middle of the day, they're all going home
Right.
at the end of the day, maybe you have a problem.
Okay. Thank you.
We're not able to ascertain that yet. Generally speaking, there will be some savings.
So it's good news, but cautiously optimistic.
Yes,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
I wouldn't, I guess the answer is it'll be good news, but I wouldn't count everything of it. And
Okay.
just remember, we're $13,000 over budget.
The original budget.
Thank you, Pat.
And the finance subcommittee had a good discussion about, if anyone remembers pre-COVID, we had like an early registration for the bus fees. Do you remember that? So that hopefully this summer, again, we can get as much of that planned in advance and get a feel for those numbers before, the end of August.
Okay. Moving on to next agenda item is full day kindergarten. How did you want to do this? Did you want?
Well, so originally, I was going to say originally the conversation that you had before was to have a discussion tonight, and so we had talked about whether or not that discussion should be moved in light of the shifting budget conversations. And we've been talking about having the full day, the tuition-free full day kindergarten conversation outside of the budget discussion because it has a separate long-term strategic plan attached to it, and it was just addressing different priorities. So when we are talking about it, we now know what the budget looks like. It would not be my recommendation to, although there have been questions about whether or not the ESSER funds should be used to impact the FY23 gap, that would not be my recommendation. My recommendation would be that we would continue with the original plan based on all the different work that we've done in terms of looking at the budget, that we would continue with that because it's been approved by DESI. There were questions about that. There were questions as to whether we can use the ESSER 3 funds for this. It is a very different funding cycle, and we had to submit an application for this, and DESI has already approved our use of that, so they are already saying that yes, this is an appropriate use of ESSER 3 funds.
Right. From the committee, oh, sorry, go
And
ahead.
I think that's a great point of clarification because people were wondering, is this permissible with ESSER 3? So Chris had addressed that. Also, I do just want to clarify, while ESSER 3 is a single grant and therefore considered a one-time fund, we do have, if people weren't necessarily watching or it was hard to follow, we do have a 7-year strategic plan to absorb that funding and wean off of these one-time funds that were allocated. So by no stretch are we saying, let's use these funds to fund tuition-free full-day kindergarten, and then what costs almost $1 million, we just have to either go to the town or try to figure out blindly where that will be coming from in future years. So we do have a plan to wean off and to use the school's operating budget to absorb the cost over time.
And we've said this a lot, but I mean, it's very strategic given that it feels like a definite possibility that at some point this will become an unfunded mandate.
Yep.
And this is a very strategic, gradual way of bringing that in tuition-free before we'd hit that sort of an unfunded mandate that we would be forced to do it maybe over the course of 1 year or 2 years. And so for those who haven't seen, especially that one slide that you have that shows the 6 or 7 years and how we will address it over those years, it's really helpful. And
Which is in the
appreciated.
packet.
Which is in the packet. Yeah, we put the presentation in there again.
From December.
So Chris, just to clarify for anyone who hasn't heard us use the word unfunded mandate before, that's something that comes down from the state. The state says do this, you have to do this, and it generally has a very short time frame on it, and they don't care about your budget. It has to be done. So that wouldn't necessarily be an unfunded mandate from us. That would be an unfunded mandate that the state would put upon us. So, and
Thank you. Yep.
the writing on the wall in other districts is most districts are moving this way if they have not already, because full day K and other early childhood ed initiatives are steamrolling through.
Yeah.
So.
And I will also say Pat shared with us during the subcommittee, the finance subcommittee meeting, because she had been a part of a statewide conference, and they were talking about this because the legislation is in process to make it a requirement in the state of Massachusetts. And so I think she very wisely asked the person presenting, if you were planning to do this, is this something you should wait on, because will there be funds? And he made it very clear, I would not count on that. I would not count on having funds to support this as well too.
And I think it's important to mention the part that's sort of not being said is that the only other way to do this is with an override, right? Like there is no way to just flip a switch and find a chunk in the budget to make a new initiative like this happen. So to lay it out in this strategic way is uncomfortable, right? Because there are unknowns in future years. But it's the most proactive approach and responsible approach that exists in our control. So, sorry, I just wanted to elaborate on that.
Lori?
I know in this discussion, we are having, the nuts and bolts funding, 6-year plan, how this works from a budgetary perspective, but it is important for people who may just be tuning in tonight to please refer back not only to the presentation that's in the packet, but to the discussion that we had on December 6th, because we had a very detailed discussion and a fantastic presentation from our professional educators about the importance of this initiative. At that time, I was one of the people who advocated a little bit of restraint because there were so many unknowns in the FY23 budget. I know that we are not through the entire FY23 budget, but I feel like we have a lot more information now, and I have a much higher confidence level that we do have a path forward with FY23. So I'm fully confident to, voice my enthusiastic and unequivocal support for full day K, and I'm comfortable with taking the vote at this point. And I appreciate administration's patience and the public's patience, as we just needed a little bit more time to understand how FY23 was looking before being fully comfortable making this commitment. But I'm certainly at that point. I hope others on the committee are ready to do that as well.
Go ahead. I was just going to re-emphasize that point too, that we had made a conscious decision to try to talk about this outside of the budgets, because things can get so in the weeds when a programmatic decision comes up during the tension and the emotions of the budget season, of the budget process. So that was a conscious decision on our part. I know it might, as a casual observer, it might seem counterintuitive, but we were trying to just do that in December so that there wasn't that false equivalence between reductions being made for the FY23 budget and this initiative to move forward. I think we ended up with muddy water anyway, but.
Yep. And I think we've said it, but just to clarify again, the vote in December was, I don't remember the exact motion, but it was generally a vote of support for tuition-free full-day kindergarten by this school committee without a specific approval for the 22-23 school year. And this vote would be to basically green light it for the coming school year, which means that the kindergarten registration process can begin in a timely manner so that families can plan, and we know.
I believe I made a really terrible analogy about how in December we got engaged to full day K, and
Today's the wedding,
today's the
potentially.
wedding.
Today's the
So
wedding.
today,
Thank you for remembering that.
When is the honeymoon?
There's no honeymoon. Okay.
So I think that part of, if this vote goes accordingly today, I think that part of this going forward is that we have to be good salesmen of this program, right? And salespeople of this program, because I see this not just as a benefit to our schools. I mean, it's a benefit to the town in general, right? Like, in some of the discussions that I've been having with people who might not have school-age children, just don't understand how much kindergarten actually costs, and how much of a financial commitment it actually is, which really puts strain on our working-class families. And we also see, we saw the numbers, you know, K through 5, our enrollment seems to be going down every year. And I think it's a problem, and that we as a town have to continue to offer things to entice young families to come to this town. And I think that this is something that we really should be doing and that we need to do. And I think now's the chance to do it with these extra funds. So.
Well, and I agree. I think people in my cohort that maybe have older children who went through half-day K and were like, well, they turned out okay, don't recognize that Westford has truly become an outlier, and that other towns have this and we do not. We have quickly become an outlier, and it's only a matter of time until the state forces us to no longer be an outlier. So this is a problem that we have to address, not only for the equity concerns within our community, but because, and I think that goes to your point of being salesmanship for this program, so that the broader community understands the importance of it, and how the statewide climate for kindergarten has completely changed, and we're behind the 8 ball on it. So now we're fixing it.
There's less than 30 communities statewide that still charge a tuition for full-day kindergarten.
350,
Yeah.
right? 350.
Yeah. So
the other thing to note on this is, by creating an equitable kindergarten experience for all our students coming this fall, kind of starts off the next group. We've all been talking about, obviously, COVID and the experience on our younger learners in recent years. I think this will allow a really solid year of schooling for all our kindergartners, so that our kids who are older, because I know some parents have expressed concern over that we're using ESSER funds for, not current students, but I actually think what that ensures is that the services that any of our older students who have gone through COVID and are still in our K-5 or middle school years, the services almost follow them, as they need, rather than continuing potentially having to plug gaps in what is, nearly 3/4 of our kindergartners are getting kind of full day experiences, and that does create, inequities as you get into first and second grade. So I actually think this is a very solid,
it's an investment.
It's an investment, that's the word.
There's a cost to doing it and a cost to not doing it.
Yeah.
And to the point that it's not our current students, I hope nobody who has preschoolers is taking offense to that, because
they are.
Our current students are in those preschool rooms and have had their last 2 years impacted by COVID, just like every other grade level. And by starting them off next year, I think it's the right thing to do.
Any other thoughts?
I think Val should do the motion.
Got a lot. I could talk about this all night. We've been trying. Motion to approve tuition-free full-day kindergarten for the 2022-2023 school year.
Second.
Valerie with the motion, Alicia with the second. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, I'll call for the vote. All in favor of full-day tuition, kindergarten next year? Okay, unanimous.
Wow.
The balloon drop.
Thank you.
Gloria, have you got the
Okay.
champagne?
Non-alcoholic champagne.
It's Earl Grey tea.
It's
It's Earl Grey tea.
Also very celebratory beverage. Okay, we're going to move on to the FY23 budget discussion.
Come back down to earth.
Do you have the slides, like right
You-
before this meeting?
Yep, you want me to project?
That's so cute.
We shared.
I appreciate the applause, though.
I did.
Better than having an empty room.
Yeah.
Okay. You want to start with that then?
Sure.
Okay. You advance,
Yeah.
my usual.
So, I know I was trying to keep it all in one presentation so that I was making sense. And then I think the majority of the questions that I think you had before, I think we'll be quiet and let you ask more questions and deliberate. We're just surrounded around reminding us what the initial reductions were and then clarifying the rationale for the new reductions. So, are you controlling that?
I thought I was.
I thought you were too. Okay, all right.
Okay.
There we go. So, as a reminder, so the first couple of slides are going to talk about the initial reductions that we had in our proposal that still exist, because that's what helped us with the first budget proposal. So we are looking at 4 FTEs at Westford Academy, 1 from the English department, 1 from art through attrition, 1 from math through attrition, and then 0.4 from social studies through attrition, and then an additional 0.6 FTE that we're going to determine once we've been able to see the course requests.
Can you, what's that timeline? Like, what's course request?
Are we looking at April?
Yeah.
April. Okay, thanks.
April. If I could just add a couple
Yeah.
more things to that. We actually had the administrators kind of share a blurb, because I know you're saying, or you have asked, what are the implications? And so when we heard the details or asked for the details, what we found is that the details aren't entirely ironed out yet, because the intention is that we're going to continue to offer the same offerings and then see where the chips fall. So in some cases, it may be we can offer all of the offerings and have increased class sizes within the ratio, average ratio. In other cases, there may be a situation where there's a low subscribed elective course, for example, in which case they would not run that based on the enrollment. And so that would be a different strategy to work with those individual students to see another option that might work with them if the numbers show that it would be best to take the approach to not run that particular elective. So for that reason, we really want the student interest to drive how that pans out in each one of those. And then one other question too was, particularly for the in the scenarios where we aren't making the reductions through attrition, and then of course the 0.6 is to be determined based on signups. So that is in regards to English. There was a question of, have we spoken to that individual and identified and had those conversations around the RIF process? And RIF is reduction in force. So in terms of that process, what we need to do is to start to get a feel for the committee. We aren't going to wait until formal approval, because at this point it's June, right, before beginning that process, in fairness to the staff members. The next step would be we're doing preliminary work now, looking at the seniority list and the licensure of individuals. We'll be working or consulting with the union. We have a meeting scheduled with the WEA officers to go over that, and that's right after we come back from break. And it's not as easy as saying within a department, who's least senior, and it is difficult to lose any staff member. And in particular, when we're looking at our current English department, it's a senior staff. There's not a lot of movement amongst our English teachers. But throughout that RIF process, we are looking at everybody, and it's not just at Westford Academy, everybody's licensure and their seniority. So there very well may be a person at another level who has a license in another department that you wouldn't necessarily know because they're not currently teaching under that license. And so there could be a lot of movement before identifying. So we can't just look at a department and say who was hired last. So it is quite a process, but we would go through that, like I said, we've started, but more officially, and communicate that right after break.
Are you looking for questions as we go along, or save them to the end?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Do you want questions as we go along, or do you want to save them until the end?
Whatever you prefer.
Why don't you
As
ask?
we go? Yeah.
Yes, since we're talking about English, I know our English department came and spoke to us at our last meeting. I do have some concerns that English is on this list. I know that, I believe it was 2 years ago, we had a 0.6 reduction in the English department. So I am surprised to see that department on the list again so soon, when I know there are other departments that haven't necessarily had reductions during that time. I know English is a core subject. It is a hallmark strength of our students. We've repeatedly heard from our students and young alumni that when they go on to college, that they feel that one of the things that Westford has done so strongly is prepare them to write in college. And I just worry about a reduction in this department. I know that by saying that means the reduction has to come from someplace else, and I am mindful of that, and I know there was a process that led up to this, but I feel like I would be remiss in not saying this one makes me nervous, for all those reasons.
Right. So then this is breaking down again what we had already talked about, that the 2 at the elementary school would be at Navnasset and at Crisafulli due to the enrollment. There is other movement that exists, but it's a net addition or reduction. If you remember in the original slides, we talked about movement within a building, which showed that. And the bigger point being is that this still allows all of the class sizes to remain at or below the 22-to-1 average, which is something that the committee's been committed to.
And on a relatively positive note, now that you have approved full-day kindergarten, that included an extra 1.5 teachers. So now that 2.0, now that we are moving forward with a full-day K, becomes a 0.5 reduction at the elementary level, because we'd be adding staff for the kindergarten.
So, Carrie, and that would also involve the conversation about licensure, et cetera. So, though you're talking about 2 buildings there, that may actually mean staff stays or moves within the system. But
Correct.
that's
It's
one
never
conversation
never
we have.
contained to within a building.
Okay.
I do just want to add that the reason why we didn't necessarily say that before is that that's when it starts to get muddy, right?
Yeah.
Because that is
Yeah.
because
Yep.
that funding has already been determined with our FDK proposal.
Right.
So we would have been looking to hire people for that purpose. So that's here. I just think that's really important for people to understand that that's not, that's just the way that it would most likely, the end result be, yeah.
Yep.
And so then, we had talked about this again before, because of the enrollment, the current enrollment in grade 5, we do see that reducing 2 sections, specifically at Stony Brook in 6th grade, is financially responsible. And it's looking at keeping the class sizes at or below 25-to-1. If we didn't do this, then the class sizes would be like 16-to-1, which just doesn't seem like that's the right thing for us to be doing. And it would not be consistent with the class sizes at Blanchard as well, too. So that's the purpose of this. And we talked about in terms of the model at the teaming at the middle school, it's not possible to reduce 1 section, right? Because it needs to be that component for the teamed courses. It needs to be the humanities and the STEM classes in order to remain balanced on the teams. This one, no one had questions about, which is pretty interesting. That we did have stipends in our budget for a number of years to support MCAS testing by hiring additional people to support that process. And now that it has gone online, the actual act of turning papers over and tests and counting is not quite the same. So we believe that this is something, we've talked about this with the administration. So some of the things that the individuals were doing will return to the principal and assistant principal in the buildings, just to make sure that they're still organizing everything appropriately. And so now we're talk about the additional reductions that we had proposed previously. And so the first one is talking about reorganizing central office. And so if we were to reduce the HR coordinator and the director of digital learning, reassign the HR department to the office of the assistant superintendent, and this is what I had started to talk about earlier, Catherine, when you had mentioned hiring a director of equity. I do think, I will say, in the conversation with members of our response team when we were working a lot of this work, a couple of people asked me if we have this opportunity to hire a new director of curriculum instruction, is it possible to also look for somebody who can be bringing a specific equity lens to the work that we're doing? And so I thought about that, and in talking about it and looking at it, the curriculum and instruction work truly is the heart of any school district, right? And so if we were to specifically ask and look to hire somebody who would bring an equity focus to the curriculum and instruction work, that's actually a massive part of what we need to be doing. When we talk in terms of I think the magnitude of doing an equity audit on our curriculum and instruction throughout the district, to know that the person who was leading the curriculum and instruction work was also already authentically embedding an equity view to that work, it would help us in that regard. It would not be a district-wide equity director in the same way that we've been talking about it, but I think it is a step in the right direction to make sure that we are infusing our curriculum and instruction work with an equity mindset in ways that we're trying to build that capacity in our other departments as well too, to make sure that we're all bringing that focus to the work that we're doing. But that, I think it was more moving in this direction is a commitment in a different way, but I want to be clear that it's not a traditional director of equity that we were talking about, but I do think that it would be a meaningful addition and focus.
Do you think it would work well then with that if we were able to fund a district-wide DEI director, that they wouldn't be overstepping? It could be something that would work well together if you're able to find someone who can bring that equity lens obviously to the role, because that's the other question, that equity lens.
Yeah.
What that
I mean, I will say I don't want to seem like I'm fighting you on this, Catherine, but I don't think that that's a good use of ARPA funds to try to bring a different director of equity without having that built into the budget. So that's just why I'm like, I don't think they'd be stepping on toes if we were to do that, because it would just add an additional lens. But that's why I feel like building this into the budget and making this a very specific focus in the way in which we approach curriculum and instruction, I think is something that we can do with the budget that we have.
So I also have to say that this also lays the groundwork really well for if we eventually decide we want that to be an independent office. And I cannot tell you how happy it makes me to see this on here in an integrated position where it's curriculum and DEI together. I am just beside myself. I'm so pleased with that. So pleased with that.
I do think if we were to continue, even if we did something as a consultant basis or something to that effect that wasn't a commitment to a long-term job that we didn't have the funds to support, because that's really my only concern with it, right? Then I think it would be it would be an excellent partnership. Yeah.
My only concern is that, I think of having a DEI director really as an external hire, and I would like to think that, that if this is what we do instead, that we really try and consider having an external hire in one sense, because I think it's really important to the community, that we have some other influence. We've clearly had many incidents over the years with our own staff, and I think it would be, it's almost like we're auditing ourselves in one sense by having an internal candidate. So and that's not to say anything about our staff, but I think there's merit in looking for outside.
We would definitely,
Yeah.
open this up, and I think it would be something we'd be looking for. But I
Yeah.
would actually be more concerned about committing to only having an external candidate, because I actually do think that we have both. We could have both, because while we are having issues that we're talking about even tonight, the fact of the matter is that there are people who are within the district who have been championing anti-racist work, and I think are working there. So I wouldn't want to say that it would have to be external. But
No,
I hear you and I
yeah.
agree with you, and it would definitely be, we would want to find the most qualified person, period. Yeah.
And that adds qualifications to that
That's right.
job description.
Yeah, we added new potential job descriptions that then you would have to, approve and vote on at a different time, but at least showing that the way in which those, I think those responsibilities and qualifications, what they would look like.
These conversations, this one and in the previous discussion about enrollment reductions of teaching staff, it's really hard for the committee to have these discussions because we know that we're supposed to be looking at roles, but roles equates to people. And we know when there's a reduction due to enrollment among our teaching staff and it sets off this risk process, it's incredibly stressful for everyone involved, for the administration, for the WEA, for all the staff members that are impacted who may be shifted from one building to another, et cetera, even if we are able to retain them. Similarly, with this central office reorganization, again, we do have to talk about the roles, but I would feel remiss in not recognizing that we are also talking about valued and respected colleagues.
Absolutely.
And it's difficult to have this discussion, but I feel under the financial constraints that we are under, the enrollment reductions on the teaching side and this reorganization and the savings that it yields is a very responsible fiscal decision. And I appreciate all the work that went into making these tough choices, but I also want to recognize the human component to it. And we have to make some hard choices here, but I appreciate all the hard work and thought that went into making these choices. Thank you.
Thanks, Laura.
So when we're talking about the principal aides, I do know that I think the initial concern was, okay, if you're talking about principal aides who are supervising students at recess and lunch, are they talking about, and we talk about reducing hours, then are we talking about reducing lunch and recess for students? That was never part of the equation. That was never anything that we were being considered. What we did was that we looked at how long the lunch and recess was at each building and looked to see would it be possible for us to continue to do that support if we were reducing those hours. So that's what this is showing you, is that they would still be, there would be no change in the lunch and recess time that our students have. The change would be in the amount of additional support that our principal aides are able to provide the main offices before and after lunches and recess, right? It would reduce some of that time. So some of the things that they were doing administratively to help, or even, and they still themselves have time before and after to prepare for lunch and recess. But it would be reducing that, and so the burden would fall on the administrative offices to for some of that work that was being done. And then the last piece was, I know, when you use a word like reading, people will immediately be concerned that you're talking about impacting something as important as reading for our youngest learners. And so we wanted to provide a little bit more clarity as to the rationale behind this proposal. So we have 24 literacy support personnel at the elementary level, K to 5. 9 literacy specialists who are licensed full-time teachers, and they're not a part of this reduction. We have 15 reading interventionists. There's not a license required, although some of them have them. There's not a license required. They're trained and highly trained by our curriculum coordinators, and they work depending between 4 and 5 hours each day, depending on the level that they're working at. So currently, right now, we have the same number of resources in each one of our schools, regardless of the student population. So at the at the K-2 level, we have 2 literacy specialists and 2 reading interventionists at each one of the schools. At the 3 to 5 levels, we have 1 literacy specialist and 3 reading interventionists at each school. And then currently you'll see here that with the K-2 students, 75% of them, and then 94% of the 3 to 5 students who are currently receiving reading intervention, they're in a group of 1 or 2. And so we're talking about that would be increasing by 1 student. So someone working by themselves might be working with another person. If they were working in a group of 2, they might be working in a group of 3, which is what the next bullet says. And the bigger piece is that with this, that our students will still be able to receive the same reading intervention services. That will remain the same. The challenge with this is that instead of being in one building, and when we talked about centralizing it, I think it was important, we want people to know that they're still going to be working in the schools. We weren't talking about them being here in central office and then going out for emergencies to the schools. It was more the idea that they would still be at schools, but we would let the data indicate where they should be assigned. And so then they would be based on the student needs and not necessarily just an equal distribution of personnel.
Thank you. I thought this was really helpful to get that context in writing in the slide, so I found that helpful. And just to be clear, you mentioned some group sizes will increase by 1. You said some, but not all.
Right.
Not all. So whereas it's mostly 1 or 2 now, it sounds like the kind of the average will shift a little bit maybe towards 2 with some groups of 3 potentially.
And you reminded me of something really important today just about that. We actually do have there are some groups that might be, I can't think of the word other than planned, but they're deliberately based on the student needs. Like there might be a group of 4 in one building based on that specific group of students and what they were working on at that moment in time. So if there's somebody at home thinking, wait a second, my child's in a group of 4 right now, that's true. That is not. This is what the data is telling us, though, that the majority of the students are here.
Okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Carrie.
Well, I just want to acknowledge that while this is a more efficient use of time and personnel and, in this case, funds, there's also certainly the loss that each individual would feel if they aren't full-time in the building that they have always been in. Each building has their own identity, their own culture, and so that, I think, will probably be the biggest impact of this type of adjustment. It's not an unusual model. Big picture, we do this with our English language learner teachers, and we have 5 ELL teachers. And each year we look at the caseload and the distribution among schools, and we try to keep them as consistent as possible in schools that they know and are familiar with and know the teachers and how the schedules work. But absolutely they shift based on the student needs, which is what they're hired for, right, is to address the needs of the students. So this would kind of mimic that model. We do not see that every 8 weeks somebody's transitioning to a new school. We're thinking these very well could be year-long at a school, or perhaps there might be some adjustments come January with the benchmark assessments, if those warrant it. But we do believe that once they're deployed to a school, then any sort of movement, just like it is now, would for the most part be with those staffings within that school.
Go ahead, John.
So my concern with the elementary reading interventionist is that, I've sat on this committee for long enough, and it's the 3rd year in a row that we've had some tough reductions, right? Anecdotally speaking, it feels like it often happens at the K-5 level. And which makes it a difficult pill to swallow, right? Especially K-5, because they can't come and join us and advocate for themselves like our WA and our middle school students have in the past. When we keep seeing reductions like this, right, and I'm going to steal someone else's analogy that they use for this, is that it kind of feels like death by 1,000 cuts, right? Like maybe we don't feel it the first year, and maybe just cumulatively year after year after year, my fear is that it's going to catch up to us at the lower levels. Particularly because I agree with Catherine that these reading interventionists might be another level of support that can help grab students who might be on the verge of needing special education services, things like that. It's particularly with the state's push and with dyslexia coming to the forefront of education again. It strikes me that that this one's really a tough pill to swallow. We've continually talked about COVID and how we want to make sure that our youngest learners and that our learners in general that they're all where they should have been pre-COVID and that we're trying to reduce that impact that it's had on our learners. The reading interventionists, right, they're particularly going to be working with, third graders, fourth graders, fifth graders, right?
So it's K to 5.
Yeah, K to 5. But our grade 1 students now our students who at the beginning of COVID are now in third grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those students would be taking advantage of these types of interventionists. It just strikes me that this isn't the right time for this type of reduction. If we can find a way to lessen its impact or to bring these folks back, I'd certainly be in favor of it.
I do just want to reiterate that from a student, and perhaps that doesn't change any thoughts, but it's important for all of you to know, as well as families to know, that from the student perspective, we won't be servicing less students than we are now, nor will we be reducing the services that those eligible students do have. So when you're talking about the impacts of COVID, the students that we see now would continue to be seen.
But it will look different, right?
From the student point of view, no, not necessarily from
They might
from
have
the
another
staff
person
member.
sitting next to them.
I guess that's what I'm getting at. It will look
Yeah.
different. There'll be
Yeah.
more students in the room. It will be less. The reading interventionist to student ratio will be higher, correct?
Yes, in some cases,
Okay.
but that can be strategic, and there isn't strong support to show the difference between one-on-one and very small group. Its impact. So we're very comfortable in terms of the progress students can make if there are 2 in a group where there used to be 1, with the exception of certain student profiles, in which case those would still be able to be taken into account. And then the same thing going from 2 to 3. That incremental increase would not, I feel confident, wouldn't have an impact on students' ability and progress. And the research does support that.
Okay.
So, while I understand we're talking about inefficiency here, I do have a concern that, like Sean said, we don't really know what's coming down the pike from the fallout from COVID. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about, I sat in on the select board meeting the other night, I heard a number of departments say, well, we don't need that, we don't need that. A bunch of people canceled things. We have covered math interventionist additional hours through COVID funds. Is there a way we can apply for that next round of ARPA to, if not the whole 4 staff members, at least half, something, to not lose all 4, to give us a little bit more wiggle room as we go into next year, as we really start to assess what hopefully next year will be our first full year back with every student, to try and, can we apply for those second round ARPA funds for this? We've done it with the MIs.
Yes, we can, right?
Yeah. Yes.
I have a piggyback question, which would be, how would you measure or quantify how we're doing? Like, how would you know whether that would be helpful, or at what point that we don't need that anymore? You know what I'm saying? Like, besides just time on, kind of one-on-one time or one-on-two time, whatever it is, the student time. How do you feel comfortable with the progress students are making? Can you just talk about some of the things that you look at from a curriculum standpoint to measure how our students are doing with reading?
Yes, we have a lot of diagnostic reading assessments, and if you recall, I gave a very balcony level summary in the fall to show where our students are coming in when it comes to fluency and accuracy and comprehension and phonological awareness. And we just actually completed our winter round of benchmark assessments, and the data looks incredibly promising. We're very proud of the work that has been accomplished. Our teachers are magnificent with all of the obstacles with students returning to schools. And of course, the supports that we have in place are unmatched in most districts, and so we're grateful for that. The first meeting in March, we'd like to have the curriculum coordinators come back and to share with you some of the more details to help you see how we quantify what I had just said. Does that answer your question? So our data's showing that
Yep.
it's really promising.
Yep.
The first part of your question?
I think it was just sort of relating that to the need, like what, I mean, it's hard, I know, because there's a lag, right? There's a lag in all these student supports that are in place and what kind of actual reading outcomes we have. But I'm just listening to Alicia and thinking, okay, if we did that, how would we then convince ourselves that, okay, doing that for a year, A, was beneficial and B, was sufficient. And now we're comfortable saying, okay, that was a 1-year ARPA funded, 2 more RIs, and then we're comfortable. If that makes sense.
Because our data may look really great right now, but for me, it's about anticipating what it looks like next year. And as great as the data may look now, I do have concerns about going all the way down to 4, going all the way down by 4, if we can even half that, so that we can hold on to the potential of additional staff members for another year. And if the ARPA funds are there, I'd like to suggest that we apply for, some remediation there.
Can I ask on the benchmarks on the data that we're kind of using? Last year, I'm just curious as to the benchmarks we're using this year in the fall and winter assessments. Is that being mindful of the fact that last year we kind of prioritized specific areas and kind of standards? And what I'm curious to know is, the reporting of that data right now, is that incorporating it, or is that comparable to pre-COVID standards?
It is comparable to pre-COVID standards, and what we found out is kids are coming in with slightly less alarming than one might think when they think that students were in school face-to-face for just over 50% of the time. So it is comparable. We haven't adjusted what the expectations are based on the fact that some of the teaching expectations were adjusted for last year. So it is the same standards.
The one other point then, I do want to come in, and I appreciate the information. I do also, like we're saying about anticipating potentially, or what the future might hold, is the one thing that I think we do keep hearing about, though, is that these teachers are having behavioral issues with some kids, anxiety, in the classroom and stuff. And there are times when I know as a teacher then you're going to be potentially focused. Like, I'm just curious as to how much impact that might have on, and I don't think those behaviors are going to go overnight. And I just kind of wonder is, if a teacher's attention on her teaching time and input with those students in the room, if some of that is being taken away, the focus is being taken away, do at least having those interventionists for now give us a bit more support and backup while we try and get everybody down to base level. And I know you're looking at the data, Kerry, and you're kind of saying it looks comparable, but I'll be honest, I still prefer the idea of keeping them for at least one more year, you know, but I understand at the same time that we have to do efficient budgeting and be fiscally responsible, so.
I wonder if it does
Yeah.
make sense to add this to the ARPA discussions then. And obviously that, we can't say anything here tonight because, you know, that's, or phase two, we're still kind of formulating
Yep.
what things might be on the table. But I think the finance subcommittee would be eager and happy to start discussing some of these things with, you know, the administration and think about where those resources, potential resources might be best used, especially given the impact of COVID over the past couple of years. And so it's really helpful to hear all these ideas and think about and Catherine, like what you just brought up, it's sort of a second order effect. You know, it's not the direct impact, but it's something that I think we should be thinking about when we're looking at the ARPA, potential ARPA.
One of the things I would just like to mention, so that for some clarity for all of you and anybody who's listening, the difference between the math interventionists and the reading interventionists, right? So the rationale behind the math interventionist request is that, first of all, they've always had an hour less than the reading interventionists at the 3 to 5 level. And so the request was that allows us to provide more services for students, whereas this conversation, and if we were to ask for the money, it wouldn't be the same. It's not, this is not removing services for students. So I guess that's kind of what I want to say. And I think you all are aware of the difference in the 4 hours to the 5 hours, so that was kind of a point, but I don't think everybody in the community is aware of that. So if they hear us asking for math interventionist time, but not asking for reading interventionist, or if we do, you know, what is the difference there? Plus the idea that we have literacy specialists and reading interventionists. We do not have math specialists
Yes.
in the same regard, and so it's a different intervention.
I just wanted to add sort of one point, and I feel this like tension, right? Because I know that anything that has to do with reading is going to feel emotional, and feel like elementary carrying that brunt. But I do feel that like the intent behind it, the sort of creativity and the efficiency are the type of things that are going to try to make room for full day kindergarten, later school start times, for the things that we think we need to get to be the district that we talk about being. So I'm happy to, like, I appreciate the conversation. I understand the hesitancy and the emotion. But I also want to recognize the intent of the proposal and the creativity and that efficiency that you're looking for.
And the difficulty in
Yes.
Identifying these places where there might be some room to restructure things.
Right.
But also we've talked about the human cost as well.
want to scooch forward.
And, you know,
Microphone.
what's that?
Your microphone.
Oh, you're right. I talk loud. But, yeah. But the trade-offs
Yeah.
and the work the difficult work going into identifying them.
Right.
Other comments on this while we're on this slide, or is that the last slide?
That's the last slide.
That's the last slide.
Does Pat want to add anything?
Nope.
Any nuggets?
Nope, I was just here in case there were questions.
So just a quick timeline question. Is Finance Subcommittee meeting again before our next budget presentation on the 28th? Yeah, the 28th.
No.
We are not.
Not that you had to. I
Right.
wanted to be.
It's 'cause
No, the next,
keep an eye out for.
the next meeting is after the potential vote.
Okay.
Right.
And then in preparation to try to prepare for any questions that the town FinCom or select board might have as we move towards that joint meeting.
Okay.
Right.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to have it in my head
Yeah.
for questions where I should be sending them. That's what
Yep.
I said.
And to reiterate, the vote right now would be on February 28th, our next meeting. There would be room for final deliberation at that meeting. There would be room for additional public comment at the beginning of that meeting as well. So this is not the last chance to think and talk about the proposed budget. But that said, is there more discussion right now that we want to have. All right, we'll keep the questions percolating. Thank you for collecting the questions, and thank you for responding to them. It's helpful.
Excuse me, Chris, did you want to just announce that the public hearing is March 14th?
Yes, thank you. So we statutorily, or at least policy-wise, have to do a public hearing on the budget. We actually do it after we approve the budget, but it's sort of that last chance for the public to hear and know what the approved budget is before it goes to the voters at annual town meeting. And it's announced in a different way. It's not just part of this it is part of our regular meeting, but it's also announced and posted in additional ways. So our vote would be on February 28th, and then that public hearing would then be on March 14th. Thank you for reminding us. Thank you. Okay, well, it is 9:15, and that means it's time for our 9:15 agenda item.
Wow.
It's kind of amazing.
We get back to
Which
the.
would be, yeah.
We're actually on the 9:25.
Update. I have the updated agenda that
Yeah.
got posted late, so I modified the times on that one.
Very good.
You even zoned in a little bit
Yeah, I really
further.
tweaked
Wow.
it, yeah. Okay, COVID updates.
Oh, I don't know that.
So
There's a lot happening, a lot
right,
of
there is a lot. I
movement.
mean, I will say that the bulk of this is going to be about the information with the masks. Okay, our numbers as reported on the on our dashboard have gone down. We've had 44 reported cases in February versus the 279 or 278 I think in January, which was different. So you're all aware, the commissioner on February 9th announced that their decision, DESI's decision, working with DPH, to recommend that the mandate from DESI expire February 28th. So we are currently operating under that mandate. And then we also have a town-wide mandate by the Board of Health that's also masking, but the school committee does not have a separate mandate that we have ever created for schools. We were following the DESI guidance. I know that there's a lot of opinions, there's a lot of feelings, there's a lot of emotions around this decision, as we've seen from people who've reached out to us, people who've talked tonight. It is my recommendation that we follow the DESI guidelines, that we continue to, we've seen success in Westford following what DESI has suggested, and so it would be my recommendation that we allow the mask mandate here to expire on 28th as well, and I'm open to conversations about that or questions.
Okay.
So my question is that the school committee never voted for mask mandate. It's regulated by DESI and then Board of Health. So have you talked to the Board of Health about that?
So if the Board of Health, I mean, I have been in conversation with, is Ray Dick the
Yes.
permanent?
Ray Dick is,
Yes.
yes.
I know she, I didn't know if she was an interim or if she.
She's an interim right now.
Appoint- no,
Okay, so the,
appointed.
yes.
Appointed.
Appointed.
In terms of, so if they were to decide to extend the town mandate, then that would include the schools unless they articulated otherwise, which they could do. They could decide to exempt the schools from that, or they could decide to lift the mandate in town in general. So we basically, when I went back through the conversations that we've had, we never had a specific vote for us to we were just following the DESI guidelines. That's what we were doing. We were mandated to do that, so we talked about testing, we talked about a number of other things, but we didn't actually have our own mask mandate here. So, does that answer your question, Ming Chen? I think.
So you say that we're going to follow the DESI guideline, but are you going to actually send a recommendation to the Board of Health before their meeting?
I will, based on the conversation we have, I would share with them what my recommendation is, and I would share with them that we're if I think if I have the support of the committee for that, then I would let them know that we would plan to let it expire as well here on the 28th. So so they have a meeting soon, right?
Mhm.
So they have a meeting this week. If they decided to extend it, and they knew that my desire was that it not exist in the schools, then they certainly have the ability to exempt us from that if they want to. They also could not do that if they wanted to. I think the reverse thing is that if say they have their meeting Thursday night and they vote to lift the mandate in Westford, our kids and staff still need to wear masks on Friday because we're still underneath the DESI mandate, right? So that's kind of a bigger thing. They could make a decision to just automatically just lift it at their meeting and without a specific timeline, in which case I would want it to be clear to people that we're actually operating under two different mandates, one being a local and one being the state. So I would share with them what my recommendation is. They have the authority to either agree with that, or if they, as the local board of health, they could decide if they wanted to do that or not.
I don't think they've posted an agenda yet, but I suspect they are going to be looking at this because I don't think they've met in a while. So
Their agenda always has like one item, say
Yeah.
vote possible.
yeah,
like
yeah, there you go.
Monday.
So
So, recognizing that when we made these choices, we were talking about pandemic policies. And we, as a community, need to start focusing on endemic policies. My concern is these two things. First is, that's the day after February break. And every time we've had a long break from school, we've seen a spike. So my knee-jerk reaction is, don't do it the 28th, give us a week after the 28th, a week of data, and do it the following Monday. And secondarily, I'd like to hear what the sort of the guardrails are. What does it look like if there is a spike after we have done away with the mandate? Being clear that it will still be an option for people to wear masks if they choose.
And they still have to on buses. They still would have to
And because that is
on the
federal?
federal transportation. They still would have to when they enter the nurse's office.
Right.
And unless DESI and DPH changes their guidance, if someone has tested positive and is coming back to school after the isolation time period, there's still an expectation for them to wear masks.
Right.
And yes, I would want to make it very clear within our community that if this is the direction that we go, that we are not requiring it of people, but we are absolutely respecting people's desire to wear masks, right? Making sure that, because I know people were concerned about that as well too, and I feel like we have seen that locally. I think people have been very respectful of choices that people make. That might not be the case around the country, but I feel like here, that is something that people have understood when there were people who were choosing to or not, when there were options to do that. And I feel like we need to make sure that we're making a very clear statement that we are supporting individuals' choices if we were to do that.
So, which then leads me to providing the public with what the guardrails are. I know that we can't necessarily say, if X number of cases, then
Right.
Y response, but I think the public is going to want to know this whole thing, none of it has been permanent, it has all felt fluid, it is still a fluid situation, but giving the public more information on if we see a spike, if there is an outbreak, say it's one classroom in a building, is there going to be a different response for that one classroom? Is there going to be a different response if it's the high school or one of our K2 buildings? I think we need more of that information for the public so that they understand not only what the unmasking, the dates and the parameters for the unmasking, but is there a point where it could potentially come back? And I think reaffirming the mitigation that's going on, reaffirming the testing and things like that. So those would be my two suggestions, would be give us the week after break to make sure that we don't have one of those spikes that rolls through after every school break we've seen. And then let's clarify for the public what the guardrails are going forward.
Tom?
I guess I saw that too, right? That the date fell the day after vacation. I guess I'm less concerned about that because I think that we now have the tools to kind of, if there is an issue, right? Like
The testing is
Yeah,
continuing.
the symptomatic testing, like I did.
And the at-home rapid testing will continue. That
Right.
continues through the
But
year.
that's helpful for what Alicia's suggestion was, is maybe give our parents a little more guidance on that. Because I didn't realize that we were supposed to be doing that on Mondays until I discovered it. But so I mean, it makes sense now, right? The symptomatic testing, if our families could do it Sunday night or Monday morning, you know, hopefully that would give us a little bit of notice coming back from the break. But I mean, I'm not overly concerned about because the numbers have been declining. I mean, it's pretty obvious. Albeit a little concerning after a break, but I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time.
So just a little perspective, because I'm kind of weighing like all of these things because there's so much positive. Like the numbers look so much better.
Yeah.
I mean, so I've been like plotting it. So there you can see this the spike in the decline after. The vaccination numbers are so good in town. So like just gratitude to everybody for taking that seriously. It's just such a simple thing to do that like is helping us all. The testing, you know, I feel a lot better now that we have that. But I would also point out that the numbers, so if you remember back in the fall, and I always sort of stuck on this number that the CDC used, was this like 7-day new cases per 100,000 residents, right? And they had the low, medium, high, substantial, and high transmission based on that. And we're still like many times the top of the high transmission zone, right? We're above it by many times. So just perspective, there's still some transmission, but I think that's coming down. So I think that's good. And I'm happy that we feel like we're getting to this place where we can see that we're ready to maybe take the masks off. But I would also say, let's wait a week after vacation. It's so, like, we know there's going to be increased transmission that week. There's just going to be, and it's one more week. It's so easy to just put that out 1 week. I would feel a lot more comfortable just giving that extra buffer. We've made it this far. I think we can do that week and just all feel like that whatever happened over break, whatever transmission there may be, give it that chance to be quashed in the masks. And then aim for the following Monday.
I think when DESE is removing their mandate, they are kicking it back to the local level, and we can take all of our local factors into account, and we do have the high vaccination rate, but let's face it, this is Westford, and we know all these families are going to be traveling, and that makes me really nervous. And while I understand what you're saying, Sean, that they could test Sunday night or Monday morning, there's an incubation period that doesn't get accounted for there. And if a child or a family is exposed, and we know there's, potential a new Omicron variant, and we don't know the potential of all of this, that extra week could make a big difference, I think, in families' comfort level, just because of the travel and because we've seen the spikes after every vacation.
I'm sorry. We've had the public come here. I can't let outbursts from the crowd. Please, we had public comment. You're invited to the next public comment as well. You're invited to email us.
I do.
I think a week makes a big difference. I think that we are trying to make responsible choices for all of our families.
I don't want to ask you to leave. I don't want to have to do that, but we have to continue our meeting. Okay?
These are my kids. My kids that I'm fighting for.
I understand. And we are all listening to everybody from the public. We're listening to all these balanced factors that go into this. We really are. We're trying to do the best we can. But we have to continue our meeting. We have to continue our meeting. You didn't talk at public comment.
Because you posted this at 9:25 and I have 3 kids that I have to get to bed to be here.
Our agenda was posted last week.
It doesn't matter, I have 3 children that I have to be here to fight for.
Okay.
I would also like to hear the input from Board of Health and from our consulting physicians. if we were not going to do that additional week, I think I would need that reassurance from Board of Health and the consulting physicians that they were comfortable in not doing the additional week. Barring that information or reassurance from them as medical experts, I have to default to, based on our experience, that yes, we should take that additional week.
I also think that maybe that one additional week might give us time to get, because I'm aware with February break and everything next week, to get some maybe protocols into place, like Alicia's saying about, you know, looking at thresholds and stuff. You know, I think it's important that we're very conscious of our high-risk students and the high-risk families as the masks do come off, and I think we have to be very conscious about what are we going to put in place to protect them, and I'm assuming that's a discussion kind of on a school level between nurses and staff, but I think it would be really important that that conversation happens, because we do have families in this district who are in a rock and a hard place right now about what's going to happen. So I think it's really important that we figure out what those protocols look like and we communicate them sooner rather than later, so those families kind of have clarity on what to expect going in. I also think, you know, we've got to be mindful of our under fives, like one of our public commentators mentioned. You know, unfortunately, the data that came out recently this week is that that vaccine isn't coming anytime soon. And I know we don't have a mandate in our preschools right now. I think it's optional. The Board of Health mandate.
Board of Health mandated it, but DESE did not.
But DESE did not. So I think this also warrants a discussion as what are we going to do for our preschool kids knowing that they are not vaccinated. And the final thing I think we also have to discuss is chances are, even when the masks do come off, we're going to have a lot of colds and flus going around that people had not been subjected to for the last 2 years. And I just think it's really important that teachers are ready to go with, you know, Google Classrooms or whatever, if we do see an uptick in absenteeism, not necessarily due to COVID, but just because we're getting walloped by what used to be a, you know, 3 or 4 day flu or cold or whatever. So I think it's really important that we maybe give us just a little bit of time to get that kind of, you know, things in place and have the discussions so that everybody is clear coming back into March then what it looks like for Westford.
To add something to the list in terms of communication, I think there is a fundamental misunderstanding of when this is over, it's over. I mean, I have visions of people, you know, throwing away their masks and thinking we're done, but there would still be the requirement on the bus. There would still be a requirement in nurse's office, you know, and I think that's an element of communication to all families that everybody needs to understand that. And with the vacation in the middle, I think it's really tricky to do that communication effectively and really get that message out. I think if we buy ourselves that additional week, it allows for those conversations with those high-risk families who are going to be extraordinarily concerned and nervous about this, and we have to make sure that we're respecting their children's medical needs, and buys us that time to do that communication with all of our families so everybody understands what the expectations are. And then we cross that bridge, and I think that will be great. We're talking about a week.
And even with that extra week, I would expect that there's going to be confusion about the transportation, right? So do buses have extra masks?
Yep.
They do, okay.
And they'll have to have more.
Yeah, because I was going to say, a lot of kids are going to come to the bus
Yes.
thinking, oh, masks are on, and they're like,
Just like there'll be
oh,
masks in the nurse's office and
yeah,
things like that.
so that's good.
Yeah, we would do
We
that.
should be ready for that.
Yep.
So that's, and the transportation one, again, that goes through the 18th of March as of right now, is my understanding,
The
right?
18th or 14th, I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's that Friday.
Okay.
And so presumably that, I mean, there might be additional guidance, who knows? But that's when that expires currently. Yeah.
I have a point I wanted to make, but I also wanted to pause in case our students wanted to weigh in.
I had a question, actually. Is this decision going to be made before the end of that week where the mask would come off? Just because...
I think the intention was to say that if we go a week beyond February break, someone help me with what that date is,
I think the 7th.
that we would say tonight, as of March 7th,
Okay.
that's when we would
Yeah.
end masking in schools.
I
Not
guess.
that we would wait and talk about it again on the 28th,
Mhm.
that we would give ourselves the 1 week to make sure that we came out of break without a spike and communicated like everyone's been saying tonight, and then on March 7th, we would,
Okay.
yeah.
That makes more sense because I was kind of thinking, I mean, 1 more week is not a huge deal. We've made it 2 years, but we know that the numbers are going to go up. And I was just thinking that we should also keep in mind that we know the numbers will go down again after that week. So
Yeah.
I guess I would be kind of nervous if we had to reevaluate and then it just kind of kept going on.
I think it's safe to say the decision would be made, but that we would obviously respond, and the superintendent has the authority to respond to specific things that arise, in between our meetings. So if there were an outbreak, an appropriate response could be made that wouldn't require us to come back and discuss it.
So are we saying that, we'll be essentially voting to extend it by 1 week tonight, but that, I'm assuming on the 28th, though, we'd be looking for a kind of presentation on the topics that we've outlined in terms of what does this look like for our under fives, protocols?
Well, so, yes, if you want to extend it, then you would need to make a motion and vote to do that. As far as one of the questions, like Gloria's, and maybe somebody else mentioned it too, about like seeing how that week goes, I feel like that I wouldn't be able to share on the 28th, right? But in terms of, if there's been, other protocols and updates, I feel like we are definitely moving towards a time when we know that masks are a mitigation strategy that has existed, and I feel like as a society, people will wear masks when they're not feeling well in ways that they haven't necessarily done in the past. There could be a scenario in which there was a decision to temporarily wear masks either in a building or for one reason or another, but we've just moved to such a different way of dealing with COVID in terms of the contact tracing and in terms of all of those other aspects that I don't necessarily know if we would have very specific protocols, like if the numbers go here, we'll automatically trip this again, but I think we can have those conversations. So what new information we presented on the 20th could be, based on questions that anybody in the committee might have, hearing specifically from, well, you'll know if the Board of Health makes a decision this week, then you will know that information.
More in terms of, though, what are we going to do to help our high-risk families? What are we going to do for our under fives? Like, we don't need to see how that week goes in order to get that information out and have those discussions now. So that's kind of the information I think it's really important that we have on the 28th in advance of the masks coming off on the 7th, so that everybody is clear as to what is happening and how it affects them.
One thing I'm struck by when I read Commissioner Riley's memo is that he mentions that it's sort of in joint with the Mass DPH, which I respect the mentioning of that because it's not the CDC, it's just our state. But I also appreciate that he is talking about the high vaccination rates, which we think applies to Westford. We're in the 90s for most age groups, and I think I saw 5 to 11-year-olds are in the 70s. But the rest of that sentence is the widespread availability of COVID testing. So I don't know if you mentioned this in your opening, but do you have an updated percentage of people who have opted in to the sort of at-home pooled testing? Because I would also just make a plea to people watching who feel invested in this discussion that is a way to help us feel safer about these decisions and to be using that mitigation strategy in their own home. I would also just have a follow-up question too. I think Gloria mentioned the consulting physicians. Have you had any of those private conversations so far?
I've not talked with the consulting physicians this week.
Okay.
No, I've not.
And I will speak for myself. In the absence of that, I don't know that I feel comfortable voting tonight. I am not a medical expert. In the absence of that, I would personally vote to back your recommendation because you are the superintendent and you are following DESI.
The numbers to your question, I was able to get them right away.
Oh, great.
So we have 2,117 people who are participating, and that includes staff and students. So we have 472 staff. We have 1,609 students under 18, and we have 36 students over 18 who are participating in who are receiving the rapid antigen at-home tests.
I'm sorry, Chris, what were the students under 18?
1,609.
1,000.
So over a third of our students.
Yep.
And
And
about a little over half of our staff.
Yep.
Sounds like.
But a lot of families, they have like antigen tests themselves,
Have their own.
right? So they
Yep.
don't necessarily need to sign up.
Sure.
But I do want to actually mention something like which Xiao mentioned. Is like I have seen like not in Westford, right, but in a couple of like other schools, the Monday morning like you do a quick test before you go to school, and then if you are negative, you can go to school. And then obviously, anytime during the week, if you have any symptom, you have to actually get really PCR test. That actually has been working very well for a number of schools, which I know of. So really, it's like I know the concern about like the week after February vacation, but the same thing happened like after the Christmas break. Those schools now using this kind of mitigation strategy basically have like Monday swab test, Thursday swab test to actually to catch all those like Swiss cheese kind of like so that they know like the number of people who actually are positive, right? And then be able to actually isolate.
And I will say for our staff for this week, last week when the commissioner made this announcement, he also allowed us to change our staff participation numbers for this week so that we could get tests for all of our staff members, even if they haven't elected to participate. Those will be coming in this week. They didn't let us do that for students because there's just so many students throughout the Commonwealth. It's similar to what they did in December when they provided tests for staff. They did the same thing again. So we did increase our number for this week's order so that all of our staff would have the availability to take one home over the break with them. It doesn't cover all of our students, but it does provide that opportunity for all of our staff.
Are we hearing if we're catching cases with these at-home rapid on Monday morning, Sunday night?
I have not
Are we
asked
getting
whether
reports?
those
Yeah.
positive reports that we're getting are from those
Yeah.
or
Just
they're
curious,
not.
yeah.
I think there's been some.
Probably some, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in absence of a motion, the superintendent recommendation will be acted on. But we could make a motion to recommend a modified recommendation.
Chris, I also want to call attention to the fact that for every person who says, I come down on this side, we have an equal number of people who say, I come down on this side. And in suggesting going out 1 week, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying let's give ourselves that week, let's communicate, let's give the week for the potential spike, and tell people, like we just told our students, it would be date certain, March 7th. It's 1 week.
Do you want to make are you making a motion? Would you like
I
to?
will make a motion.
You're free to.
I will make a motion that we amend the superintendent's suggestion the superintendent's recommendation?
You would,
Would
I think you'd be making, I think the motion would be just to extend the Westford Public Schools.
Okay.
You know what I mean, like that's what,
Or recommend that the superintendent extend.
Extends.
Right.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, you have, I mean, I think we're granting you the authority.
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah.
Same impact.
It
I
is,
think.
it's kind of, it's sort of the.
Yeah.
Does our policy not
It's a
cover?
circle.
No, it does.
Okay.
So then my motion is to recommend that we extend the mask mandate in our K-12, pre-K to 12 buildings with a date certain stop on March 10th. Sorry. Nope, March 7th, sorry. I looked at my.
Exclusive.
Yes.
Not
March
including
se-
March 7th.
Exclusive of, that, is there a better way to word that?
Until.
You could say through March 4th.
Yes.
Through March.
Through March 4th, there you go.
Friendly amendment to my own motion. I make a motion that we extend the mask mandate in our pre-K to 12 schools through March 4th.
Second.
So the Saturday, March 5th.
Hold on, real quick. Let me just acknowledge that there was a second by
Second from
Gloria.
Gloria.
And now let's discuss and ask
So the
questions.
Saturday, March 5th, people don't go into the building, they don't need it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Correct.
Correct.
If there were weekend activities.
Correct.
Yep.
Because the MIAA has already put forth their guidelines as well.
Yeah, am I already lifted their mask mandate for the indoor sports as well?
Right.
So
Contingent upon the district where
The
the
local,
sport is
yep.
being played.
Okay, we have a motion, second. Any other questions or comments?
I understand like the rationale behind like pushing out by a week, but I also like that's it. Actually, they have more resources. They work with Mass DPH, so I really like respect their opinion as well.
Okay. Sean?
Yeah, I think it's a well thought out motion. I think there's a strong argument behind it, but I mean, the state's just telling us what to do, and we have the superintendent who told us that he's planning on following that. So I think we can do it. So 28th seems appropriate.
I've heard from a lot of residents asking us to add a week or 2 weeks, and that a lot of other districts are looking at doing something similar as a data point.
Do you think you could have those kind of conversations and protocols in place by the 28th?
Which protocols? The protocols specifically about when we would
For
need to-
high-risk students, for the, and then the under fives, and looking at kind of what, well, I mean, the thresholds we can see, but like, I want to keep those high-risk families, at the center of any decision we make, because we look out for every student.
I do know that a lot of those conversations have been taking place at the school level already. They've been taking place on different reasons for individual students throughout this entire pandemic. So I know there were concerns when we talked, and I had mentioned in the past about some students have specific health plans, right? I know I was criticized, somebody saying that wasn't, that they are being changed, but I feel like it depends on the language and the information that's in it. And I feel like they could still work with their, the administration at the school, and we can talk about that. I mean, I think we can certainly look at that. As far as having a presentation about the protocols, I'm not necessarily sure what that would look like. But I do say that if there was a decision tonight, then I know this week would be focused on making sure that people were leaving for vacation comfortable with what the return looks like. Because the last thing I would want to do is expect people to receive communication over the vacation.
Yeah.
So it would be a very clear and direct communication this week, and working with people to answer questions that people might have. But I feel like it is different in different buildings and different students' needs. So I would encourage us to make sure that if there are people who have those questions, that we're engaging with them, right? Whether they're, first of all, their school administration, to make sure that their answers can be their questions can be answered. And so we would try to do that beforehand, because I think, to your point, I mean, I was not at all, admittedly, I was not at all happy when the commissioner, in the middle of a vacation, decided to make all these tests available and do everything in the middle of, like, that's not, that wasn't good. I don't want to do that to anybody. So I would want to be proactive to make sure that everybody was aware. I do think that the majority of people are very aware of this conversation and are very aware of what we're talking about. So I would be shocked if somebody went into the vacation not knowing what the week afterwards was going to look like, whether it was an extension or whether it wasn't. I will also say that when there are other states that have made other decisions, right? I will say we have towns around us. Dr. Cleary and I have been talking to our counterparts in other towns around us, and there are towns that are talking about the exact same thing. And then there are a few that are having the conversations that you're having as well too. And I feel like that's also just very different, which is why I am not a medical expert. And I do think that the commissioner has access to more information, and when he talks about making this decision and with DPH, that it made me think that's why I feel like it is the best recommendation. I don't disagree with any of the thoughts though about what an extra week would do. I just feel like they have more information than we have, and so I feel more comfortable supporting that recommendation.
Does the under fives then require a separate conversation, knowing they're not vaccinated, and probably won't be for the time being?
Well, it's tough because I will admit that's been a conflict from the beginning, because DESE has never suggested that under fives wear masks, ever.
Yeah.
And right now the language from DESE is saying that they're still encouraging unvaccinated people to wear masks, but they're not encouraging under fives to wear masks. So that's a conflict. I understand the conflict because I understand the challenge that can be for some of our youngest learners. Some of our youngest learners absolutely have been able to do it. Some of them have, it's just been a challenge on a daily basis for them. So it's just even more, it's more complicated for them.
Any last questions, comments? Okay, I'll call for the vote.
Just to clarify,
Yep.
Chris, this is on the motion as stated by Alicia, right?
Yes, it should be
Thank you.
all in favor to extend the pre-K to 12 mask mandate through Friday, March 4th. Date certain. Yes, Nina?
Gloria.
Gloria. Thanks for asking. All in favor? Opposed? Okay, so the motion passes 4-3. So we'll
Communicate.
Yep. And let us know what we can do to help with that. And that's a date certain, so I think that's something that.
So I'll communicate
everyone
that
can-
to the Board of Health and to all of our families.
Okay, thank you.
Shame on all of you. I
So
know
personnel
Next agenda
update?
item is personnel update. Hey, thanks for staying so long.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
It's really nice to have you.
Thanks, guys.
Good night. Night.
Good night.
So there was a personnel update in our packet.
Yep.
Hopefully folks saw that. Anything?
No.
No additions, no, okay. Great.
Motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss a strategy with respect to Unit E collective bargaining, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position. The committee will not return to public session.
Second.
Valerie with the motion, Catherine with the second. This is a roll call vote. Catherine?
Aye.
Ming Chen?
Aye.
Alicia?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Aye. Sean?
Aye.
Gloria?
Aye.
And we are adjourned from public session.